I'm Elliot, I'm 28, and I've worked pretty hard to get to where I am. I don't mean I worked hard in the generic way people say to justify buying themselves a coffee. I mean I've been grinding since I was 16, picking up shifts after school, saving every extra dollar, and slowly building a life that I could be proud of. I don't owe anyone a dime, and I don't take handouts from anyone either, which is important because my family loves to act like I'm somehow still a spoiled kid living under their roof, even though I've been on my own for years. For a while, I thought the distance helped. Fewer family dinners, fewer fake smiles, fewer arguments about how Elliot always thinks he's better than us now. I figured if I kept my head down and focused on my own life, I could just enjoy the rare times we all got together. But of course, that was wishful thinking. The story really starts about 3 months ago. My daughter, Leah, just turned 13. She's smart, shy, and loves drawing and digital art. It's her whole world right now. I'd been saving quietly for months to buy her a good laptop for her birthday. Not just a cheap one either, but a proper $2,000 machine that could handle the art programs she wanted to use. She had no idea I was getting it for her. I pictured her opening it, smiling that huge smile of hers, and staying up all night drawing like I used to stay up playing video games as a kid. The problem was, her birthday fell right around Easter this year, which meant the big, messy, over-the-top family gathering at my parents' place. You know the kind, backyard egg hunt for the kids, beer for the adults, way too much food, and way too many opinions flying around. I considered skipping it altogether and just having a quiet weekend with Leah, but she wanted to see her cousins, so I figured we'd tough it out for a few hours and then leave before the drama started. Except the drama didn't wait for us to leave this time. We showed up early because I'd promised to help Mom set up the tables outside. Leah stayed in the living room with her sketchbook while I hauled folding chairs out of the garage. Everything was fine, normal, even, until my sister, Amanda, arrived with her 3 kids. Now, I'll be polite here. Amanda's kids are intense. They don't have many rules at home, and Amanda has a habit of laughing off whatever they do with, "Oh, they're just kids." Within 10 minutes, they'd pulled Leah's sketchbook out of her backpack and were scribbling on her drawings with markers. Leah came running outside, holding back tears, and I could feel my blood pressure spike. I took the sketchbook back, told the kids to knock it off, and expected Amanda to step in. Instead, she just shrugged and said, "Relax, Elliot, it's just paper. She can draw more." I wanted to say something right then, but I swallowed it. Big family day. No need to start a war. The rest of the afternoon was a slow boil. The kids kept pushing boundaries, running around knocking things over, shouting, throwing candy at each other. At one point, Leah tried to plug in her phone charger, and one of them yanked it out of the wall just to see if she'd get mad. Every time, Amanda would just laugh. They're having fun. When it was finally time for dinner, I felt like I could breathe again. We all gathered around the long tables outside, food steaming in the middle. I had wrapped Leah's laptop in a big gift bag and set it on her chair so she could find it when she sat down. She opened it carefully, at first confused, and then her face just lit up. "Dad, this is amazing," she said, hugging me so tight I thought she'd never let go. I'd been waiting for that moment for months, but before I could even take a picture, one of Amanda's kids grabbed the laptop out of her hands. It happened so fast, I almost didn't process it. He ran toward the fire pit, the one we'd lit earlier for marshmallows, holding the laptop over his head while the other 2 cheered him on. "Stop," I yelled, but it was too late. He tossed it in like it was a frisbee. The sound it made when it hit the flames was sickening. Leah gasped, then just went quiet, staring. I jumped up, grabbed the fire poker, and fished it out, but the damage was done. The casing had already started to melt, and that's when I heard it. Laughter. Amanda was laughing. My parents were chuckling. My dad even said, "Well, maybe that'll teach her not to be spoiled." I couldn't move for a second. Leah was standing there shaking, tears rolling down her face. The laptop was ruined, and my whole family was sitting there acting like this was some kind of joke. I set the melted laptop down on the table, slowly, carefully, and looked right at Amanda. She smirked and said, "Come on, Elliot. It's just a computer. You can buy another one. Maybe next time get her something she actually needs instead of spoiling her." I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just smiled. And that's when the entire table went quiet, because they knew that smile meant something was coming. I didn't say anything right away. I just stood there with that little half smile that made everyone uncomfortable and sat back down next to Leah. I put my arm around her and pulled her close. She didn't say a word, just kept staring at the ruined laptop on the table. It wasn't just a piece of tech. It was hours of drawings she hadn't backed up yet, projects she'd been working on for weeks. Dinner carried on like nothing happened. The smell of roasted lamb and garlic bread hung in the air, but it all felt sour. I barely touched my plate. Leah didn't eat at all. Amanda's kids were laughing and running around again, chasing each other between the tables. My parents started talking about how kids these days needed less screen time anyway, and how maybe this was a sign from above. My dad even said, when we were kids, we didn't need fancy machines. We played outside and turned out just fine. I almost reminded him that when we were kids, we also didn't have to worry about keeping up with homework portals, online group projects, or digital portfolios for art competitions. But what was the point? He wasn't interested in hearing me out. He was interested in moralizing. After dinner, I excused myself and walked Leah to the car so she could sit somewhere quiet. She clutched the sketchbook that had been scribbled on earlier, holding it like a lifeline. "Do you want to go home?" I asked her gently. She hesitated, then shook her head. "I don't want to give them the satisfaction," she whispered. She was tougher than I gave her credit for sometimes. I kissed the top of her head and told her to text me if she needed me, then walked back inside. That's when things went from bad to worse. Inside the kitchen, Amanda and my mom were standing by the counter, whispering and giggling. When I came in, they didn't stop. They just switched to that fake nice tone people use when they've been caught. "Oh, Elliot," my mom said, "don't look so serious. You're going to give yourself wrinkles. It was just a prank." "A prank," I repeated, keeping my voice even. Amanda crossed her arms and smirked. "You're acting like they burned down your house. It's just a laptop. If you didn't want them touching it, you should have waited until after dinner to give it to her. They're kids, Elliot. Kids get curious." "That wasn't curiosity," I said, feeling my jaw tighten. "That was mean. And it's not the first time they've done something like this. Last Christmas, they dumped juice all over Leah's keyboard, and you laughed then too." Amanda rolled her eyes. "You're always keeping score. Maybe if Leah wasn't so uptight about her stuff, they wouldn't mess with it." "She's 13, I said. "She's allowed to care about her things. And I worked months of overtime to buy that laptop. It wasn't just a toy." Amanda shrugged, clearly done with the conversation. "Then buy another one. Problem solved." Before I could respond, my dad walked in with a beer and said, "Are we still on about this? Elliot, you have to learn to let things go. They're just kids." I glanced at the melted laptop sitting on the counter and then back at him. "You think it's funny until someone throws one of your things in the fire." Dad took a swig of beer and said flatly, "Nothing I own is fragile enough to be ruined by a fire. I buy things that last." That was it. That was the moment I knew they weren't going to apologize. They weren't going to offer to replace it or even pretend to feel bad. The rest of the night was a slow drip of disrespect. Every time Amanda's kids ran through the house screaming, my parents would chuckle and say, "They've got so much energy. Isn't it great?" Every time Leah came inside, they'd find some way to tease her. "Still sad about your computer?" one of them would say. "Maybe you can draw on the walls instead." At one point, Amanda even pulled me aside and said, "You know, if you'd stop spoiling her, she wouldn't be so sensitive. You treat her like she's made of glass. Maybe she needs to toughen up." I stared at her for a long moment and said quietly, "I hope you remember saying that." By the time dessert rolled around, I was done pretending. I didn't eat, didn't speak, just sat there watching. I started noticing things I hadn't paid attention to before. How my parents lit up when Amanda's kids did something cute. How they completely ignored Leah. How they never asked her about school or her art. When Leah finally came back inside and sat next to me, she was quiet, but her eyes were still red. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and Amanda's oldest, who's 9, piped up, "Why is she still sad?" "It's just a dumb laptop." Amanda laughed. "Because your cousin's dramatic, sweetie." I didn't even look at them this time. I just kept stroking Leah's hair and waited for the night to end. Eventually, Mom brought out coffee and started passing around leftovers. "Elliot, take some home with you," she said. "No thanks," I said evenly. "We're leaving." Amanda smirked. "Running away already?" I stood up, helped Leah into her coat, and turned to face them. "No," I said. "I just think it's better if we go before something else of mine ends up in the fire." Dad scoffed. Oh, for crying out loud. You're overreacting. I smiled again, that same smile from earlier, and said, you keep telling yourself that. We left without another word, but the silence in that room as we walked out told me everything I needed to know. When I got home, Leah went straight to her room. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the empty gift bag I'd brought home with me. Something inside me shifted that night. I'd spent years trying to keep the peace, trying to be the bigger person. But watching Leah cry while everyone laughed at her broke something in me. And as I sat there, I started thinking about everything I'd done for this family over the years. The bills I'd covered when Amanda forgot to pay rent, the weekends I'd spent fixing up Mom and Dad's house, the times I'd bailed them out without asking for anything in return. The more I thought about it, the more that quiet smile started creeping back onto my face. Because I realized I wasn't done yet. I had options, and I had time. And if they thought throwing one laptop in the fire was the end of the story, they had no idea what was coming next. The next few weeks after Easter were tense, but strangely quiet. I didn't hear from Amanda or my parents, which wasn't unusual. We weren't exactly the daily call kind of family, but this silence had weight to it. Normally, Mom would text me a reminder about Leah's birthday thank you cards or send a recipe she thought I'd like. This time, nothing. Not even a passive-aggressive message about moving on. Leah was doing better by then. I'd managed to buy her a cheaper, temporary laptop so she could keep up with her schoolwork, but it wasn't the same. I caught her staring at the old melted one in the garage a few times, like she was holding a vigil for it. I told her I'd replace it when I could, and she nodded, but I could tell she wasn't just sad about the laptop. She was hurt by how everyone had treated her. The laughter, the teasing. That kind of thing sticks with a kid. Then, about a month later, I got a call from my mom. I hesitated before picking up, but curiosity won out. Elliot, she said, in that falsely sweet tone she uses when she's about to ask for something. Your sister is in a bit of a tough spot right now. They've had some unexpected expenses come up, and she was wondering if you could help out just for a few weeks. I almost laughed. Let me guess, rent again? Well, Mom trailed off. It's just until things stabilize. You know how hard it is for them with 3 kids. You're in a better position than they are. I couldn't help it. I actually did laugh this time. A short, humorless sound. You mean the same sister whose kids destroyed a $2,000 laptop last month while everyone laughed? Mom sighed, like I was being unreasonable. Elliot, you can't hold on to that forever. It was an accident. It wasn't an accident, I said flatly. And no, I'm not covering Amanda's rent again. If she's struggling, maybe she can sell some of those fancy handbags she buys or cut back on her spa days. There was a long pause. Then Mom said, you've changed. You used to be so generous with family. I still am, I said. Just not with people who think it's funny when my kid cries. That was the end of that conversation, or so I thought. A week later, I went to check my joint account, the one I had set up years ago to help my parents pay certain bills in case of emergencies. I didn't keep much in there anymore, just enough to cover small things if they needed them. And that's when I saw it. A withdrawal. A big one. Nearly $1,800 gone in a single transfer, straight to Amanda's bank account. I stared at the transaction history for a long time, my heart pounding. I hadn't authorized that. I hadn't even given them access to the account in years, or so I thought. Then it hit me. I'd given Mom the login info ages ago, back when I used to trust her with this kind of thing. I'd forgotten to change it. I called her immediately. Mom, I said, not bothering to hide my anger. Why did nearly $2,000 just disappear from the joint account? There was silence on the other end, then a faint, oh, that. Yes, I said sharply. That. Care to explain? She sighed, like I was inconveniencing her. Amanda was about to get evicted, Elliot. We didn't have a choice. You didn't have a choice? That wasn't your money to give, I said. You didn't even ask me. She's your sister, Mom snapped. You're supposed to help her. You always used to step up when the family needed you. Something inside me went cold. So now we're just taking money behind each other's backs? It's not behind your back, she said defensively. You would have said no, and she needed it. I let out a bitter laugh. You're right. I would have said no, because I'm not going to reward her for what happened at Easter. You all laughed at my daughter when she cried. You acted like her birthday present didn't matter. And now you expect me to bail her out like nothing happened. She's family, Elliot, Mom said. That comes first. No, I said quietly. My daughter comes first. And thanks to you. I can't buy her the replacement laptop I promised her this month. So congratulations, you didn't just betray me, you punished Leah too. Mom didn't respond to that. She just muttered something about me being dramatic and hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone, the fury boiling in my chest. It wasn't about the money, not really. I could make it back. It was the principle. They had crossed a line. 2 days later, Amanda called me herself. I hear you're mad, she said breezily, as if she hadn't just stolen from me. Mad doesn't cover it, I said. She chuckled. Look, I'll pay you back when I can, but you know things are tight right now. Maybe you should stop holding grudges. It's just money. You make plenty of it. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Amanda, you didn't even apologize for what your kids did. You laughed. You mocked Leah. And now you've taken money I didn't agree to give you. She sighed like I was the difficult one. You always make everything about you. Maybe if you'd been around more, my kids would respect your stuff. You're not exactly Uncle of the Year, you know. That was the last straw. You're right, I said, my voice calm, too calm. I'm not Uncle of the Year. And you're about to find out what that means. I hung up before she could respond. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just sat there in my quiet kitchen, smiling that same quiet smile I'd smiled on Easter Sunday. Because now, it wasn't just about a laptop. This was about respect. This was about teaching them a lesson they wouldn't forget. And if they thought taking my money was going to make me roll over and play nice, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. After that phone call, something in me went still. Not calm, just still, like the air right before a storm breaks. For days, I walked around in a haze. I'd go to work, come home, make dinner for Leah, and sit at the table with her, forcing myself to smile and ask about her day. She deserved that. She deserved a dad who was present. But the whole time my mind was elsewhere, playing the same conversation over and over like a broken record. You always used to step up when the family needed you. You're not exactly Uncle of the Year. The words stuck like thorns. That weekend, I drove out to the park with Leah just to get out of the house. We sat on a bench by the lake, watching the ducks. She was sketching in her battered notebook, flipping past the pages that had been ruined at Easter. She'd salvaged what she could. Some of the drawings were half erased, with angry scribbles layered over them, like scars on paper. Dad? She asked after a while, not looking up. Why do they hate me? It felt like someone punched me in the chest. They don't hate you, kiddo, I said quickly. She finally glanced up at me, her face serious. They laughed when I cried. Grandma laughed. Grandpa laughed. And Amanda said I was dramatic. That's not what people do if they care about you. I swallowed hard. You're right. They should have cared more. And I'm sorry you had to go through that. She closed her notebook and hugged it to her chest. I don't want to go to Grandma's house anymore. You don't have to, I said immediately. We're done forcing ourselves to be around people who don't respect us. Her shoulders relaxed a little at that, but I could still see the hurt in her eyes. That night, after she went to bed, I sat in the living room in the dark, staring at the ceiling. My phone buzzed once, a group text from Mom about a family barbecue coming up, and I didn't even open it. For the first time in years, I skipped one of those gatherings. No excuses, no explanations. Just didn't show up. And you know what? The sky didn't fall. Nobody called to check on me. Nobody asked if Leah was okay. A week later, Mom sent another text. You missed a great cookout, with a photo of Amanda's kids roasting marshmallows around the same fire pit where my daughter's birthday present had burned. It was like salt in an open wound. At work, I found myself distracted. I was good at my job, dependable, organized, but my mind kept drifting back to the betrayal. I'd find myself staring at spreadsheets, thinking about that $1,800 that had been yanked out of my account without permission, thinking about how easy it had been for them to laugh at Leah's pain and then turn around and use my hard-earned money to cover Amanda's bills. One afternoon, my manager pulled me aside. Everything okay at home? She asked gently. I hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, just family stuff. She gave me a sympathetic look. Don't let them drain you dry, Elliot. You're one of our best, but you've got to look after yourself too. That stuck with me. That night, after Leah went to bed, I finally did what I should have done years ago. I logged into the joint account and transferred every last cent into my personal savings. Then I closed the account completely, sent confirmation emails to the bank, and deleted the login from my password manager. Then I opened a spreadsheet, the same kind of spreadsheet I used at work, and started making a list. Not just of money I'd given Amanda over the years, but every favor, every weekend I'd spent helping her move, every last-minute babysitting session, every loan that was never repaid. The total shocked even me. It wasn't just the money. It was the time, the energy, the emotional bandwidth I'd given without hesitation. I'd been their safety net for years, and the first time I said no, they laughed at me and stole from me anyway. I shut the laptop and sat there in the dark, letting the anger simmer. The next day, I started taking small steps. I called my insurance company and removed Amanda as an emergency contact. I checked the deed to my house and the beneficiary information on my accounts, making sure everything went to Leah, no one else. It felt cold, doing those things. It felt like cutting pieces of my old life away. But with every step, I felt a little lighter. A week later, Amanda posted a picture on social media of her kids opening new tablets, expensive ones, the kind that cost as much as Leah's melted laptop. The caption read, "Finally got the kids some tech, so they stopped fighting over mine. LOL." I stared at that photo for a long time. My hands were steady when I took a screenshot and saved it. Not because I was going to confront her with it. No, I was past that. It was evidence. Proof. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing. When I moved, it was going to be permanent. There would be no talking it out, no tearful reunions. Whatever I did next would set the tone for the rest of my relationship with this family. One night, Leah found me sitting at the kitchen table with my spreadsheet open. "What are you doing?" she asked. I smiled faintly. "Planning." "Planning what?" "Making sure this doesn't happen again." She studied me for a moment, then nodded like she understood. "Good," she said quietly. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. The anger was still there, sharp, electric, but it was starting to feel less like a weight and more like a tool. Something I could use. Because I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to make sure they knew exactly what they'd lost. And I was going to do it in a way they would never forget. The weeks that followed felt strangely peaceful. Not happy, not yet, but quiet in a way I hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long time, my life wasn't orbiting around family drama or last-minute emergencies. It was just me and Leah figuring things out together. With the joint account gone, I felt safer. I didn't wake up dreading bank notifications, wondering what had been drained overnight. I went through every single shared account, every utility bill, every subscription, and made sure there were no back doors left open. It was tedious, but by the end of the month, my finances were completely in my control again. That's when something surprising happened. I realized I had money to spare. See, for years I'd been funneling hundreds, sometimes thousands, into Amanda's temporary crises. Without that drain, my savings started to grow faster than I'd ever seen before. After 3 months, I had enough not only to replace Leah's laptop with something even better, but also to finally upgrade my own ancient car, something I'd been putting off forever. I didn't rush out and buy anything flashy. I played it smart. I spent hours researching, finding the perfect machine for Leah, one with all the specs she'd dreamed of. When it arrived, I didn't make a big production out of it. I just left it on her desk with a note. "For you. Keep creating." The look on her face when she found it was worth every penny. She hugged me so tight, I almost fell over. For the first time since Easter, I saw her light up again. After that, things started clicking into place. Work noticed my improved focus and offered me a promotion. Nothing huge, but enough to bump my salary and give me more control over my schedule. With that came a new kind of confidence. I started saying no to things more often, not just to my family, but to anything that didn't align with what Leah and I needed. No to extra unpaid projects at work that used to drain me. No to neighbors asking me to watch their pets for free because you're home anyway. And every no felt like a brick being lifted off my chest. Then came the barbecue invitation. Mom sent another group text, this time about a big 4th of July celebration they were planning. Normally, I would have ignored it, but this time, I typed back a single message. "We won't be there. Have fun." It was amazing how fast the responses started coming in. "Amanda, seriously? You're still sulking?" "Dad, this is getting ridiculous, Elliot." "Mom, family is all we have. Stop holding grudges." I didn't reply. Instead, I spent that weekend taking Leah on a small road trip. Just the two of us, windows down, music blasting, stopping at little roadside diners, and sketching landscapes together. It was the first holiday weekend that didn't end with me exhausted, or angry. That trip gave me clarity. See, up until then, I'd been thinking about revenge as this big, explosive thing. Something dramatic, cinematic, final. But sitting there on a picnic bench with Leah, eating ice cream, I realized I didn't need a grand gesture, at least not yet. I just needed to keep building our life until it was so solid that nothing they did could touch us. So I started working on that. I picked up a few freelance projects on the side, funneling the extra income into a savings account earmarked just for Leah's future, college, travel, whatever she wanted. I fixed up my house, replacing the drafty windows and painting the kitchen the bright color she'd been asking for. Slowly, my house stopped feeling like a crash pad and started feeling like a home. One evening, Leah and I sat on the porch, watching the sun set. She was working on a digital portrait, the glow of her new laptop reflecting on her face. "You seem happier," she said quietly. "I am," I admitted. "Do you feel safer now?" She nodded. "Yeah, I like it better when it's just us." Her words landed harder than she probably meant them to, but she was right. It was better when it was just us. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized I wasn't just healing, I was getting stronger. And with that strength came opportunity. One afternoon, completely by chance, I ran into a guy I used to know from high school, Derek, who now worked at a supplier company my dad's business relied on. We grabbed coffee and caught up, and somewhere in the middle of the conversation, he let it slip that Amanda and my dad had been having trouble keeping their accounts current with vendors. "Honestly," he said, stirring his coffee, "if they miss one more payment, we might have to drop them as a client. But hey, that's none of your business, right?" He laughed. I smiled faintly. Right? None of my business. But in the back of my mind, gears started turning. Because maybe it was my business. Maybe I didn't need to storm into family gatherings and scream about what happened. Maybe I didn't need to demand apologies that would never come. Maybe the best revenge wasn't loud. Maybe it was quiet, strategic, methodical. Maybe it was letting them feel what I felt. Powerless. That night, I pulled out my spreadsheet again. This time, instead of just cataloging what I'd lost, I started adding notes. Contacts I had in the industry, opportunities one knew about that I hadn't shared with Dad's business, ways I could leverage what I knew to change the game entirely. For the first time, I wasn't just stewing over what had happened. I was thinking ahead. Leah peeked over my shoulder. "What are you working on?" I closed the laptop gently. "Just making sure we're ready for the next chapter." She smiled and went back to her room, humming. And I sat there in the quiet, feeling that familiar smile spread across my face again. Not bitter this time, but sharp, focused. Because I wasn't at rock bottom anymore. I was climbing. And when I reached the top, they were going to see just how far I'd come. Over the next several months, things began to shift in ways that felt almost too perfectly timed, like the universe was nudging me towards something bigger. At work, my promotion officially kicked in, and with it came access to certain industry contacts and resources that I hadn't had before. I wasn't just an employee anymore. I was the point person for a major supplier contract. That meant I was suddenly sitting in meetings with people who handled the same accounts my dad's business relied on. I didn't say anything about it to my family. I didn't need to. I just listened, quietly absorbing information. And what I learned painted a very clear picture. Dad's business was skating on thin ice. The industry was shifting, contracts were becoming more competitive, and they had been barely keeping up with orders. They'd already missed 2 shipments that quarter, something I wouldn't have known if I wasn't in those meetings. I didn't intervene. I didn't warn them. Instead, I went home and opened that spreadsheet again, adding more notes, more connections, more leverage. I was building a web, not to trap myself in their drama again, but to make sure that when I moved, I had the power to make it count. Meanwhile, Amanda's social media presence was as loud as ever. Pictures of self-care days at spas, weekend getaways with her husband, expensive brunches with her friends. All while I knew from that bank transfer incident that they'd been a breath away from eviction not too long ago. One post in particular caught my eye. A picture of her kids holding new puppies, grinning ear to ear. "Welcome to the family, Daisy and Max," the caption read. 2 purebred dogs. I stared at that post for a long time before screenshotting it. Not because I cared about her buying dogs. She could spend her money however she wanted, but because it was another piece of the puzzle. Another example of how they always seemed to have money for luxuries, but came crying to me whenever the rent was due. Then came the breaking point. Mom called one evening while Leah, and I were watching a movie. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. Elliot, she said without even a hello, we need your help again. Amanda's car broke down, and she needs a loaner until they can get a new one. Can Leah stay with you this weekend so we can drive them around? I muted the TV. Mom, I always have Leah. She lives with me. Mom huffed. You know what I mean. Can you drive them? They can't afford to rent a car right now. I almost laughed. You're asking me to chauffeur Amanda and her kids around all weekend? After everything that happened? It's what family does, Mom said, her voice sharp. Something inside me snapped. No, I said. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't laugh while a 13-year-old cries. And family doesn't use each other like free Uber drivers. There was a long silence on the other end before Mom said coldly, I'm sorry you feel that way. Click. She hung up. I sat there for a while, the room quiet except for the muted TV. Leah was curled up next to me, watching me carefully. You okay? She asked. I took a deep breath and nodded. Better than okay. I think I finally know what I'm going to do. That night, I stayed up late at the kitchen table, not just adding notes to my spreadsheet, but building an actual plan. Step 1. Lock down every single piece of leverage I had. I updated my will and trust, ensuring that if anything happened to me, everything went straight to Leah with no interference from my parents. I met with a financial planner, moving certain accounts into places they couldn't touch. Step 2. Position myself where my absence would hurt. My dad's business depended on a few key supplier relationships, one of which I now had influence over through my job. I didn't need to sabotage anything. All I had to do was stop going out of my way to smooth things over for them like I'd always done. Step 3. Gather proof. I printed copies of every bank transaction where I'd bailed them out, every text message where they'd mocked me for saying no, every screenshot of Amanda flaunting her luxuries while begging for help. I kept it all in a neat folder, not for revenge yet, but because I wanted a record. I wanted the truth documented. Around this time, Derek, the guy from high school, called me up. Hey, he said, your dad's company put in a big order with us, but we're not sure we can fulfill it on their timeline. They've been slow to pay lately, and the boss isn't happy. I nodded to myself. Thanks for the heads up. Just thought you'd want to know, he said. You always were the guy who kept things running. Not anymore, I thought. Meanwhile, Leah was thriving. She was entering art contests, winning a few, and even selling small commissions online. I was so proud of her. Watching her confidence grow lit something in me, reminded me why I was doing all of this. One evening, as I was cooking dinner, she came into the kitchen with her sketchbook. Can I show you something? She asked. She flipped it open to a drawing she'd been working on, a big tree with deep roots, standing tall against a storm. It's us, she said shyly. I looked closer. Sure enough, there were two little figures at the base of the tree, holding hands. It's perfect, I said, feeling my throat tighten. And it was. Because that's what we were now, rooted, steady, no longer blown around by whatever drama Amanda or my parents stirred up. I was almost ready. I could feel it. And when the opportunity finally came, I wasn't just going to take it. I was going to make sure they understood exactly why it was happening. The setup was nearly complete. All I needed was the right moment to strike. And something told me, deep down, that moment was coming sooner than they thought. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind of day that feels ordinary until something clicks and you realize it isn't. I was halfway through my coffee when my work email pinged with a notice. The supplier meeting I'd been preparing for had been moved up. Normally, this wouldn't be a big deal. But this particular meeting was about contract renewals, including the account tied to my dad's business. And because of my promotion, I wasn't just in the room this time. I was one of the people reviewing their payment history and performance metrics. I didn't sabotage anything. I didn't lie. I didn't have to. The numbers spoke for themselves. Late payments, missed shipments, an overdue balance that had been rolled over more than once. The company had been given warnings before, but they kept skating by, relying on goodwill and personal relationships. Only now, I was one of those relationships, and I wasn't going to cover for them anymore. When the discussion turned to their account, I stayed quiet at first, letting the other managers speak. Eventually, the regional director looked at me and asked for my input. I took a slow sip of my coffee, set the cup down, and said evenly, based on the data, they've been given 3 grace periods in the last 12 months. At this point, Continuing the contract without a formal payment plan in place would be a liability. It was calm, professional, unemotional, but I knew exactly what it meant. No more special treatment. No more last-minute extensions. If they wanted to keep the account, they'd have to pay up front, something I knew would hit them hard. The motion passed. By the time I got home that evening, my phone had 3 missed calls from Dad and 1 from Mom. I didn't answer. Instead, I made dinner for Leah, sat with her while she worked on a new art piece, and waited. The next morning, Dad finally got through. "Elliot," he said, not even bothering with hello. "Did you tell them to put us on prepay?" I stayed quiet for a beat before answering. "No, I told them to treat you like every other client." "Big difference." "You know we don't have the cash flow for that," he snapped. "We'll go under." I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you laughed while my kid cried, and then helped yourself to my bank account." There was silence on the other end. "You're punishing the whole family for one mistake," he finally said. I smiled faintly. "No, Dad. I'm just done cleaning up after you." Click. I hung up before he could respond. That was step 1. Step 2 came a few weeks later, when Amanda posted a long, dramatic Facebook status about how certain people had turned their backs on family and left them to struggle. The comments were full of her friends telling her how strong she was, how unfair it all was. I didn't reply publicly. Instead, I printed out every screenshot I had, the stolen money, the luxury purchases, the mocking texts, and sent a single envelope to Amanda's husband's office with a short note. "Since you keep asking where the money goes, here's your answer." I didn't sign it. 3 days later, Amanda called me, furious. "How dare you go behind my back like that?" she shouted. "You went behind mine first," I said calmly. "Consider us even." She sputtered something about me ruining her marriage and hung up. I didn't feel guilty, not even a little. Step 3 was the most satisfying of all. I took Leah with me to a local art fair one weekend, where she had a booth to sell her work. Halfway through the day, I heard a familiar voice behind me, Mom. She'd apparently heard about the fair through a mutual acquaintance and decided to drop by. I could feel Leah tense beside me, but I stayed calm. "Hi, Mom," I said evenly. She glanced at the table of Leah's art, clearly surprised. "I didn't know she was doing this." "You wouldn't," I said. "You've been too busy." Mom frowned. "Elliot, we miss you at family dinners." I smiled. "Then maybe next time you'll think twice before laughing at my daughter's pain." Her face went pale. Before she could respond, a customer approached to buy one of Leah's prints. I turned my attention back to them, effectively ending the conversation. When Mom left, Leah looked up at me and whispered, "You didn't yell." "Nope," I said, smiling. "Didn't need to." Because that was the point. I wasn't raging at them anymore. I wasn't begging for apologies or trying to make them see my side. I was living my life, building something with Leah, and letting the consequences of their actions catch up with them naturally. The calls kept coming over the next month. Dad trying to negotiate better terms with the supplier, Mom trying to get me to be reasonable, Amanda leaving me voicemails alternating between rage and tears. I didn't block them. I didn't engage. I just let them sit with the silence. And the longer they sat with it, the more desperate they seemed to get. One evening, Leah and I were having dinner when I got a text from Dad. "We're selling the house. Hope you're happy." I stared at it for a long moment, then put the phone face down on the table and took another bite of dinner. Because I was happy, happier than I'd been in years. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally in control. The text about selling the house sat in my phone like a brick for a day before I even acknowledged it. Not because I was indifferent, but because for the first time in years, it wasn't my problem to solve. It wasn't my job to fix what they broke. 2 weeks later, I heard through Derek that the sale had gone through quickly, too quickly. Dad had apparently accepted an offer well below market value just to get out from under the debt before it swallowed them. Their business had been forced onto prepay with not just my company's supplier, but 2 others, which meant they were bleeding cash flow. Amanda had quietly deactivated her Facebook account, which told me her marriage really had been shaken by the envelope I'd sent. Then came the call that changed everything. It was Mom again, her voice quieter this time, almost timid. "Elliot," she said, "can we talk?" I hesitated but agreed to meet her in person, neutral ground, a little cafe downtown. When I walked in, she was already there, nursing a cup of coffee like it was a lifeline. She looked older than I remembered, more tired. "Thank you for coming," she said. I sat down, waiting. She took a deep breath. I owe you an apology. We all do. We laughed when we should have defended Leah. We took from you when we should have respected your boundaries. And we've paid for it. Her voice broke a little on that last part, and for the first time in a long time, I believed her. You sold the house, I said. She nodded. We didn't have a choice. Your father's business can't keep running the way it was. We should have listened to you sooner. We should have appreciated everything you did for us instead of expecting it. I let the silence stretch for a long time, watching her squirm. Finally, I said, do you understand now why I stopped helping? Why I stopped showing up? She nodded, tears in her eyes. Yes, and I'm sorry it took losing everything to get it through our heads. I studied her for a moment, then leaned back in my chair. You can apologize to Leah yourself. She's the one who deserved better. Her eyes widened a little, but she nodded. I will. We parted on neutral terms, not warm, but not hostile either. A week later, I hosted a small dinner at my house. Not a family dinner, not like the old days, just me, Leah, and a couple of close friends. It was the first time my house felt truly alive, full of laughter that wasn't forced or cruel. Halfway through the evening, there was a knock at the door. Amanda. I almost didn't open it, but Leah glanced at me, curious, and I figured it was time to finish this. Amanda stood there on the porch, looking small. Not angry, not defiant, just exhausted. Can we talk? She asked quietly. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. She didn't waste time. You ruined me, Elliot. My marriage is hanging by a thread. We had to rehome the dogs. The kids ask why we don't see you anymore. I crossed my arms. You ruined yourself. I just stopped cleaning up after you. She swallowed hard. I didn't know you'd actually let us fall. You always caught us before. That's the problem, I said. I kept catching you, and you never learned how to land on your own feet. She flinched at that, but nodded. I wanted you to know I'm sorry. For the laptop. For taking your money. For all of it. I stared at her for a long moment before saying quietly, do you know what Leah asked me that night? She asked why you all hated her. She thought there was something wrong with her. She cried herself to sleep. And you laughed. Tears filled Amanda's eyes. I know. I can't take it back. No, I said. But you can teach your kids what respect looks like. Because if they grow up thinking this is how you treat family, they're going to lose people the way you lost me. She nodded, biting her lip. I didn't invite her in. I didn't hug her. But I closed the door that night with something I hadn't felt in months. Closure. Inside, Leah was sitting at the table with our friends, smiling. When she saw me, she asked, everything okay? I smiled, a real smile this time, and nodded. Yeah, kiddo. Everything's okay. Dinner that night felt like a celebration, not just of the end of a chapter, but the start of something new. Weeks passed, and the calls from my parents slowed to a trickle. They never tried to guilt me again. Amanda stayed quiet too, and I realized I'd gotten exactly what I wanted. Not revenge for revenge's sake, but a life where Leah and I were no longer the punchline to someone else's joke. The final, quiet moment came one evening when Leah brought me a new drawing. It was of that same big tree she'd sketched months before, only now the storm had passed. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, and the two little figures at the bottom were smiling. Looks like we made it through, she said simply. I framed it and hung it in the living room, right where the melted laptop used to sit before I'd thrown it away. Because we had made it through. And the next time my family tried to call, to complain, to pull me back into their chaos, I didn't answer. Not out of anger. Out of peace. Because for the first time in years, I was exactly where I needed to be, with the only person who truly mattered, building a life that no one could burn down again. And that was the final word. I was 22 the first time my father publicly humiliated me for my job. My name's Caleb, and at the time, I was working as a janitor at an office building downtown. Not exactly the dream job, but it was honest work. I took pride in it, too. I liked the quiet of the early mornings, the predictability of the routines, and the simple satisfaction of leaving things cleaner than I found them. I wasn't lazy. I wasn't directionless. I was saving money, slowly, methodically, and planning for something bigger, something no one in my family cared to ask about. But to my father, that job was the punchline to every joke, the mark of failure. My older brother, Mason, was already working at some financial firm by then, wearing suits and flashing his company credit card like it was a badge of honor. My sister, Leah, had married into money and spent her time curating a picture-perfect life on social media. They were the golden children, shiny, spotless, Exactly the kind of people my dad liked to toast in front of company. That Thanksgiving was the first time I realized just how invisible I was to my own family. It was the usual big, extended gathering at my parents' house. Turkey roasting, kids screaming, wine flowing, and adults laughing louder than necessary. I'd shown up with a homemade pie and a six-pack, like I always did. And as usual, no one really acknowledged me beyond a distracted, "Hey, Caleb." Dinner was loud and chaotic, the way it always was, with my dad holding court at the head of the table like he was some kind of emperor. He'd always liked having an audience. And of course, he loved his little speeches. Every holiday, he'd raise his glass and toast to something. Family, health, the good old days. But this time, he went off script. To the kids who made something of themselves, he said, grinning at Mason and Leah. To hard work that actually leads somewhere. And to never ending up cleaning toilets for a living. I remember the pause after he said it. The way everyone chuckled nervously, glanced at me, then quickly looked away. Mason smirked and clinked his glass with Dad's. Leah pretended not to hear, but her husband let out a snort and muttered something under his breath. I didn't say anything. I didn't even finish my food. I stood up, quietly, left the pie on the counter, and walked out the front door. Nobody followed me. Nobody called. Not that night. Not the next day. That moment stuck with me like a shard of glass buried too deep to pull out. It wasn't just what he said, it was the way he said it. Like I was a disappointment he had to laugh off to make himself feel better. Like my life, my choices, my path were just garbage to be swept under the rug. But what they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was that the janitor job was never supposed to be the whole story. I had been working nights while taking online business courses. I was learning everything I could about commercial real estate, maintenance, building codes, contracts, zoning laws. Every paycheck I earned from scrubbing toilets and mopping floors went into a savings account that I treated like sacred ground. I had a goal, a timeline, a vision. I wasn't going to be a janitor forever. I just didn't feel the need to broadcast it. Over the years, I showed up to fewer and fewer family gatherings. The invites started feeling more like formalities anyway, mass texts with no warmth behind them. And I didn't mind. I was busy building something real. I bought my first small office building at 26. It was a rundown property near the industrial edge of town. Leaky pipes, outdated wiring, the whole 9 yards. But I fixed it. I managed to clean up myself. I put in new systems, got it up to code, brought in tenants, and within a year, I was already seeing a return. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. By the time I was 30, I owned 3 buildings and had just started my own property management company. I had a team, contractors I trusted, a lawyer on retainer, and a portfolio that was growing faster than I'd ever imagined. I still dressed simply. I didn't post about it. I wasn't trying to prove anything. But I never forgot that Thanksgiving toast. Not once. It wasn't until a couple years later that I saw him again in person. Not at a family event. Not at another holiday dinner. But sitting outside my office building. In the rain. In a wrinkled shirt. Holding a manila folder in his lap like it contained the last scraps of his dignity. At first, I didn't recognize him. He'd aged badly. His hair was thinner, his posture hunched. The man who used to fill a room with his voice now looked small. He didn't see me approach, just kept staring at the glass doors like he was unsure if he should even go in. When he finally did look up, our eyes met. And the look on his face? It said everything. He knew. But before I say what he wanted, before I explain how it got to that point, you need to understand just how deep the rift in our family ran. How my father's ego, his pride, his need to humiliate and control, tore through the years like a slow, burning fuse. Because that Thanksgiving toast was just the beginning. The real fallout started after that. One choice, one snub, one insult at a time, until it all came crumbling down. I didn't stop speaking to my family altogether after that Thanksgiving toast, but something in me shifted. I became quieter, more guarded. Phone calls felt more like obligations than conversations. I kept them short, polite, distant. My siblings didn't notice. My dad certainly didn't. And my mom, well, she never challenged him on anything. She had perfected the art of looking away. Over the next couple of years, the pattern only hardened. Every family gathering followed the same script. Mason would talk about his latest promotion or his new client bonuses, and Dad would nod with pride, throwing out lines like, "That's how you build a future," or, "Now that's a man with direction." Leah would flash photos of her kids in private school uniforms, her husband chiming in with stories about ski trips and backyard renovations. They'd all talk over each other like they were auditioning for the spotlight. And me? I'd just sit there, sipping water, answering direct questions with as few words as possible, waiting for an excuse to leave. The real breaking point didn't come all at once. It started with little things, tiny, cutting remarks Dad couldn't help but throw my way. Still mopping floors, Caleb? You know, if you'd followed Mason's lead, you'd have a corner office by now. Don't worry, we all bloom in our own way. Some just take longer. He never asked what I was doing with my time. Never asked how my buildings were doing, or how my tenants were, or how I'd gone from 1 property to 3. And I never told him. It wasn't out of pride, it was out of exhaustion. Why share with people who only hear what they want to? Mom would try to smooth things over with tight smiles and weak chuckles, offering me extra pie or asking if I needed leftovers, as if that somehow made up for being treated like the family footnote. I might have let it all slide forever, honestly. I'd been conditioned since I was a teenager to just take the jabs, nod, and swallow my anger. But then came Leah's birthday dinner. She was turning 35, and her husband rented out a private dining room at one of those restaurants with more adjectives than ingredients on the menu. Everyone was dressed to impress. Leah in a gold-wrapped dress, Mason in a navy suit. Even Mom and Dad looked polished, like they were prepping for a photo shoot. I wore a clean button-down and slacks. Nothing flashy, just enough to look respectable. I wasn't interested in pretending. I wasn't there to perform. I had barely sat down when Dad gave me the once-over and smirked. Didn't have time to change after work? He asked, loud enough for the whole table to hear. I smiled tightly. I don't mop floors anymore, Dad. Mason laughed into his wine. What? You got promoted to head custodian. I ignored it. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction. But Leah was always sharper than she let on. So what do you actually do, Caleb? She asked sweetly, cutting her steak with surgical precision. You're always so mysterious. You come and go, never post anything, don't show up to half the family stuff. I shrugged. I've been busy. Doing what? Mason pressed. I mean, it's fine if you're just keeping it simple. Not everyone wants the stress of a real career. And that's when Dad chimed in again, this time lifting his glass. To Caleb, he said, the smirk returning. The most consistent one in the family. Still grounded. Still humble. Still underemployed. Everyone laughed. Even Mom, though she looked uncomfortable. It was like they couldn't help themselves. Like bullying me had become tradition. I stood up. Not dramatically, just calmly. I looked at each of them in turn, and for the first time in years, I said exactly what I was thinking. You know what's funny? You all talk so much, but none of you ever ask questions you actually want answers to. That shut them up. For a moment, at least. I own 3 commercial properties, I continued. I manage them myself. I built a company from the ground up with no loans, no help, and no handouts. I didn't tell you because I didn't need your approval, and I sure as hell didn't want your advice. I left my napkin on the table and walked out before anyone could speak. No yelling, no dramatics, just quiet, clean detachment. For a week, I didn't hear from any of them. Then I got a text from Mom. Maybe don't cause scenes at your sister's dinner. It was supposed to be a celebration. That was all she said. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just another slap wrapped in fake concern. So I stopped replying. Stopped showing up. I skipped the next Thanksgiving entirely. Went on a weekend trip to the mountains instead. Snow, silence, peace. It was the first holiday I actually enjoyed in years. But the silence from my family didn't last. 6 months later, Mason called me out of the blue. Hey, he said, sounding unusually stiff. I was wondering if you could meet for lunch. Somewhere quiet. I was suspicious immediately. Mason never wanted anything that didn't benefit him. What's going on? I asked. It's about Dad, he said. He didn't want me to say anything, but he got let go. Company restructuring. He's having trouble finding new work. I blinked. That man had been bragging about his job security since I was a kid. So, I said, he's struggling, man. Mom's worried. He's not talking to anyone. Just sits around the house all day. He's applied to places, but no bites. It's been months. I could hear the hesitation in Mason's voice, the careful way he was building up to something. He saw your name on a building downtown, he finally said. One of your tenants mentioned you in passing. He was surprised. And then he asked me if I thought you were hiring. I said nothing. Look, Mason said, I'm not saying you owe him anything, but maybe just talk to him. Even if it's not a job, maybe a reference or something. He's proud, okay? But he's scared too. I've never seen him like this. I agreed to meet. Not because I felt obligated, but because I wanted to look the man in the eye and see if he'd say it, to see if he could swallow even a fraction of his pride. That's how we ended up back at the start of this story. My father, sitting outside my office building, in the rain, holding a folder full of resumes for jobs he never thought he'd need. But before I tell you what happened when I let him in, what he said, and how I responded, you need to know what came before that. Because right after I walked out of Leah's birthday dinner, the real betrayal hadn't even happened yet. That came 2 weeks later, when I got a call from my property manager about a maintenance issue at my newest building, an issue that didn't make sense. A leaky pipe, a busted lock, a broken HVAC unit, all in 1 week. Things that had just been inspected, things that shouldn't have failed. And then a call from my bank, asking if I'd authorized a series of refund requests and canceled payments from one of my business accounts. I hadn't, which led me to check the internal admin software we used for building operations, which led me to see who had logged in remotely, which led me to one very unexpected email address, an old family email address, one Dad used to have when he helped Mason set up a small investment site years ago. Somehow, some way, he had gotten into my business systems, accessed enough to sabotage the operations. And when I traced the IP, there was no mistake. It came from my parents' house. And that's when the story really changed. I didn't sleep the night I confirmed the sabotage came from my parents' house. I just sat there in the dark, staring at my laptop, the pale glow of the screen painting the walls with a cold, sterile light. The email address, the IP trace, the system logs, it was all right there. My father had not only disrespected me for years, not only belittled every choice I'd made, but now he'd actively tried to ruin what I built. At first, I didn't want to believe it. I went back and forth with myself. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was Mason. Maybe the IP was spoofed. Maybe someone else used the network. I was grasping at anything that would let me avoid the truth. But deep down, I knew. It made too much sense. The timing, the precision, the way everything had hit at once, like dominoes falling. My father didn't understand much about modern systems, but he wasn't dumb. He was a man who'd once managed an entire department, ran audits, handled accounts. He knew how to mess with logistics. He'd just never used that knowledge against me before. Until now. I tried to confront it rationally. I took screenshots. I documented the timestamps. I pulled security camera footage from the offices to show who hadn't been there when the maintenance requests were logged or accounts accessed. I built a quiet case, not for a lawsuit, at least not yet, but for myself, to confirm that I wasn't imagining things, that the betrayal was real. But even knowing the facts didn't make it hurt less. I was hollow for weeks, went through the motions, nodded through meetings, signed papers without reading them twice. My assistant, Lila, noticed first. She kept asking if I was okay, offering to take things off my plate, but I just told her I was tired. She didn't press. She was good like that. Knew how to give space without leaving me alone. The real blow didn't come from the sabotage itself. It came when I finally drove to my parents' house and walked in unannounced. Mom was in the kitchen, frosting cupcakes. Like it was any other Tuesday. She blinked at me, surprised, but smiled. "Caleb, sweetie, you didn't say you were stopping by. Want coffee?" "Where's Dad?" I asked flatly. Her smile faded. He's in the garage." "What?" I didn't answer. I just walked past her, through the living room, past the old pictures of Mason's graduation and Leah's wedding. There were no pictures of me on the walls. When I opened the garage door, he was sitting at the workbench, sorting through a box of old tools like he was waiting for someone to need him. He looked up, startled, and his face stiffened. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said. I held up the folder I'd brought with me. Inside were the printouts of the logs, the traces, the screenshots. I handed them to him in silence. He took one look and scoffed. "You came all the way here for this?" he asked. I waited. He set the papers down on the bench, like they bored him. "So what if I looked into your little business? Thought maybe if you were serious about growing, you could use some structure. Your systems are a mess, Caleb. You're running it like a janitor." My mouth went dry. "You accessed my accounts. You triggered false work orders. You tried to tank client confidence." He shrugged. "I was testing your setup. You're the one who's always so sensitive." I stared at him, disbelief flooding every cell in my body. You really think this is your version of help? I think you've spent too long thinking small. I thought if you saw where the cracks were, you'd wake up and finally let someone with experience help you run things. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so insane, so self-righteous. That laughter was the only thing between me and screaming. You didn't help. You sabotaged. You humiliated me in front of the family. And now you break into my systems, and you call it help. I built a career from scratch, Caleb, he snapped. I know how to run an operation. You just lucked into some property and suddenly think you're a mogul. Lucked into, I whispered. He stood up, towering over the bench now, his eyes flashing. You're not special, son. You're just bitter because your brother passed you by. You always have been. I didn't respond. I didn't argue. I just turned around, walked out of the house, got in my car, and drove away. That was the last time I spoke to my father face-to-face for almost 2 years. I wish I could say I bounced back quickly, that I channeled my rage into fuel and built an empire. But that's not what happened. For the first time since I was 17, I seriously considered quitting, selling the buildings, walking away, finding something quieter, smaller, something that wouldn't make me a target in my own family, something that wouldn't make me question every choice I'd ever made. But I didn't, because 2 weeks after that confrontation, one of my longest tenured tenants, a pediatric clinic, called me personally. The HVAC unit we thought had been wrecked by the sabotage, I'd paid to replace it quickly. No drama, no delays, just did the job. And the clinic director wanted me to know how much she appreciated it. You're one of the best building owners we've worked with, she told me. The last guy ignored everything. You're always present. You care. And something about that stuck with me. I cared, even when no one else did. Even when my family mocked me, ignored me, tried to tear me down, I cared. About my work, about my tenants, about the spaces I was building and maintaining. That meant something. I poured myself into the business. Not with anger, with intention. I upgraded security systems, hired an IT consultant to review every vulnerability. I rebuilt the backend with layered permissions and two-factor authentication, updated the tenant portal, and created new SOPs for maintenance teams. I cleaned house, top to bottom. Then I expanded, bought a 4th property, then a 5th, opened a co-working space in an abandoned mid-rise, hired a small team of local contractors full-time, gave them benefits, holiday pay, and real respect, something most landlords never even considered. I didn't just want to grow. I wanted to build something that didn't rely on smoke and mirrors. Something real. I started mentoring a few young people too, mostly folks like me who worked night shifts and saved pennies, trying to figure out how to climb. I didn't broadcast it, but I made space for them, answered emails, took calls, showed them what I'd learned the hard way. And slowly, quietly, the weight started to lift. I stopped checking my family's social media, stopped comparing my milestones to Mason's vacations or Leah's curated perfect life. I unfollowed them, muted the group chats, and carved out a life that made sense to me. The buildings became more than just real estate. They became symbols of what I'd survived, what I'd outgrown. And every lease signed, every tenant retained, every system improved. It all felt like reclaiming a little more of myself. But the past has a way of circling back. And 2 winters later, it did. That morning, I came in early. The sky was gray, soft flurries falling outside the large glass windows of the downtown office building I'd bought 6 months earlier. The coffee machine sputtered to life in the break room. I was reviewing new leasing agreements when Lila poked her head in. "Hey," she said, hesitant. "There's someone outside. Said he's here about a job." I looked up, confused. "A walk-in?" She nodded. "But, Caleb, it's your father." I froze, then stood, walked to the lobby windows. And there he was. Same man. Same cold smirk softened by years of wear. Holding a folder, standing in the snow like he didn't have anywhere else to go. He'd returned. But this time, he wasn't there to gloat. He was there to ask for something. And I hadn't yet decided if I was going to give it to him. I didn't go out to greet him right away. Instead, I stood there behind the tinted glass, arms crossed, watching my father shift his weight from one foot to the other as snow began to collect on his shoulders. He looked smaller somehow, like someone had let the air out of him. Not just older, diminished. The confident, commanding man who used to toast over turkey and belittle me with a smile was now just cold, waiting, hoping. And yet, I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, no urge to gloat. Just a strange, heavy stillness, like the silence before a storm you already know is coming. I turned to Lila. Don't let him in yet. Her eyes widened. Are you sure? Yeah. Let him wait a bit. She gave a slow nod and walked off, heels clicking softly on the polished floor. I went back to my office, closed the door, sat behind my desk, and let my mind work. I thought about everything that had led to this moment. The years of snide remarks, the public humiliation, the sabotage he'd tried to frame as help. And now, here he was, jobless, desperate, standing outside the building I owned, looking for a way back into something he had no hand in building. The irony was almost too perfect, but I wasn't interested in petty revenge. Not anymore. I wanted something that would last, a message he couldn't ignore, a lesson he couldn't twist into pride. So I started planning. The first thing I did was pull up the folder I kept labeled contingencies. It was where I stored documentation of the sabotage, everything I'd quietly gathered and filed away after our last encounter. Back then, I didn't know if I'd ever need it, but something in me couldn't let it go. And now it felt like a loaded chamber waiting for a trigger. I printed a few choice pages, IP logs, system access, timestamps. Not everything, just enough to remind him I hadn't forgotten. Next, I called my lawyer, Sam. He was sharp, discreet, and had been on retainer since the second building. Hey, I said, hypothetical question for you. Let's say someone with a history of hostility towards you showed up looking for work. Someone who had previously accessed your business systems without permission. Could you legally hire them and also use that contact to secure protections in case they ever tried something again? There was a pause. Hypothetically, Sam asked. Hypothetically, you could, but you'd want an airtight contract. Boundaries, NDA, limited access, monitoring. Might even be worth it to create a role just for that. Nothing essential, but enough to keep them close. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Got it. Thanks, Sam. Caleb, he added, voice low. You sure about this? No, but I'm not planning to offer him a job. I'm planning to offer him a mirror. After the call, I reached out to Lila. Bring him in. She hesitated. Want me to sit in? No, this one's mine. I stood as the door opened and my father stepped inside. He looked around, taking in the office. The dark wood paneling, the subtle, modern furniture, the framed certificate on the wall, my LLC's registration. He lingered on it a moment longer than necessary. Then our eyes met. Caleb, he said, voice scratchy. Thanks for seeing me. I gestured to the chair across from me. Sit. He did. There was a long pause, heavy with everything unspoken. He cleared his throat. I know this is unexpected, but I figured I'd try. Things have been hard lately. I said nothing. I know I haven't always been the most supportive, but I'm looking for something stable now. Thought maybe, if you had something. I let the silence stretch until it bordered on cruelty. Then I opened the folder and slid it across the desk. He looked at it, then back at me. I remember this, he said softly. So you kept it? I nodded. I keep a lot of things. He didn't open it, just rested his hands on top. I was wrong, he admitted. About a lot. I wanted to believe you were still figuring things out, that I still had time to teach you something. But I see now, you built this without me. You don't need my help. No, I said calmly. I don't. He swallowed hard. But you came here anyway. He nodded. I don't have anything open that fits your background. I continued. And frankly, you're a liability. I can't risk another breach. His face tightened. But, I said, I can offer you something. His eyes lifted. I have a new division. Property inspections. Nothing glamorous. Just routine checks. Plumbing, HVAC, structural walkthroughs. Field work. Clipboards. Reports. Entry-level stuff. Contract only. No admin access. No systems. No keys. His face fell just slightly. Sound beneath you? He shook his head slowly. No, not anymore. I leaned forward. If I bring you on, it's with full monitoring. Weekly check-ins. Random reviews. Any deviation from the route, any missed appointment, and you're out. He nodded again, smaller this time. And you sign a statement acknowledging your past interference and agreeing to cease all access attempts or communications related to my internal systems. Permanently. I pulled out the pre-drafted agreement from Sam and slid it over. He took it, read a few lines, then looked up. You already had this ready? I knew you'd come eventually, I said. I just didn't know when. He looked down again, then signed. When he handed it back, I didn't smile. Didn't shake his hand. I simply stood. Lila will give you your schedule. You start Monday. He rose too. I searching mine for something, gratitude, maybe, forgiveness. But I wasn't offering that. Not yet. As he turned to leave, I added, one more thing. He looked back. This doesn't change the past. You may be working under me now, but don't mistake that for acceptance. He nodded slowly, then walked out. I sat back down, heart pounding, not with anger, but with a strange, calm clarity. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. But it wasn't over yet. Because I wasn't just planning to keep him close. I was going to show him, day by day, building by building, exactly what I had built, what he dismissed, what he tried to break, and what could never be taken from me again. I didn't want an apology. I wanted him to see the truth and live with it. Every single day. He showed up on time that first Monday. Gray jacket, stiff posture, the folder I'd given him tucked under his arm like a schoolboy's homework. Lila handed him the checklist, explained the system, showed him how to scan QR codes posted in each mechanical room and maintenance corridor to verify that he'd completed his inspections. He didn't say much that day, just nodded, listened, wrote everything down. It was strange, seeing him like that, subdued, compliant, quiet. Not once did he comment on the office layout. Not once did he suggest improvements. The man who once dominated every room with his presence now barely made a sound. But I knew him too well. That silence wasn't humility. It was shame. And the real revenge? That came slowly. Every building he was assigned to, every clipboard he carried, was a reminder that he didn't own the empire. He was a part-time field tech on a probationary contract. He was no longer the voice at the head of the table. He was the man who reported to his son. The man who once made a Thanksgiving toast mocking janitors was now, by every stretch of the imagination, doing janitor-level work, and under strict surveillance at that. The system I put in place didn't leave room for excuses. Every entry point had a camera. Every QR scan recorded a timestamp. Every tenant could leave feedback. And I made sure his schedule included the very building he once drove past and mocked me for, that dump downtown, he used to call it. The one I had flipped into a co-working hub now full of freelancers, startups, and 2 local newsrooms. A building where, once a week, he now had to check the boiler room, wipe dust off the ceiling grates, and log airflow reports. I never humiliated him in public. I never raised my voice. I didn't have to. I let the silence speak. I let routine be the punishment, the new normal. But the real fallout, the one that cracked his pride into pieces, came from the rest of the family. Because I didn't just stop at hiring him. I updated my will. I made a donation to the private school Leah's kids attended, under my company's name. And I offered Mason's firm a property management contract for one of my satellite buildings on the outskirts of town. When the paperwork came in, he read the owner's name and called me immediately. Wait, you own this place? He asked. Since last quarter, I replied. He paused. Why offer me the contract? Because I believe in giving people opportunities, I said, with a calm he couldn't argue with. You're trying to make a point. No, I said. You made the point for me years ago. I'm just letting it echo. He didn't respond after that. But over the next few months, word spread, quietly, subtly. The family group chats got quieter. The holidays became more awkward. Nobody toasted anything anymore. And at the next Thanksgiving, for the first time in over a decade, I hosted dinner. Not because I missed the noise, or the rituals, or the empty compliments, but because I wanted to change the story. The table was long, set with dark green napkins and gold-accented plates. Lila helped organize the caterer. A few of my close friends came, along with their families. Mason showed up alone. His wife had a thing. Leah came late, dragging her husband and kids, eyeing the place like she was casing it for comparison. Dad arrived last. He didn't knock. He just stood outside until someone opened the door. When he walked in, I noticed something had changed. Not in his face, not in his voice, but in the way he didn't look at anything. Not the chandelier, not the art, not the velvet curtains. It was like he'd trained himself to avoid measuring, avoid reacting, avoid being seen seeing. I let the room settle before I stood at the head of the table. Everyone turned to me, and I raised my glass. To old roles, I said. The ones we outgrow. A few chuckled. Some looked uncomfortable. Dad said nothing. I continued. To new beginnings. Earned, not handed. Leah looked down at her plate. Mason cleared his throat. To the people who build quietly, I added. To the ones who were underestimated, dismissed, ignored. Now the silence was thick. And to the ones who learn, sometimes too late, who the real builders were all along. I clinked my glass gently against the one in front of me, then took a sip. Nobody said a word. After dinner, while the others made polite conversation or hovered around the dessert table, Dad stepped out onto the back patio. I followed. He didn't look at me. "I don't know what you want from me," he said quietly. "I come to work. I don't complain. I stay out of your way." "I don't want anything," I replied. "Not from you." He looked down at his hands. They were shaking slightly. I'd never seen them do that before. "I'm sorry," he said. Not loud, not rehearsed, not even fully formed. But it was real. And I nodded. "Okay." We stood there for a while, just breathing in the cold air. He didn't ask for more. I didn't offer. But when he came to work that Monday, he was 15 minutes early. And he stayed late. Months passed. Then a year. His contract ended, but I extended it. Slightly better pay, same role. He never asked for more. Never overstepped. Something in him had settled. Not submission exactly, just reality. And over time, the tension eased. We never became close. Never had long father-son talks or played catch-up. But one day, I saw him pause in the lobby of one of my buildings, look up at the company logo on the wall, and nod to himself. It was barely a gesture, but it was enough. He knew. And the final piece of revenge was that I no longer needed it. The power he held over me for decades, his approval, his recognition, his validation, was gone. I had taken it back. Not by force, but by becoming undeniable. My revenge wasn't in making him suffer. It was in making him see. And he did. Every single day. Until the end. And the last words he ever spoke to me were these: "You built something I couldn't even imagine." My name's Marcus. I'm 32. And yeah, I'm the guy who pulled his name off the mortgage after my mom told me, flat out, that I wasn't welcome at Christmas. But let's rewind a bit, because this didn't just come out of nowhere. This story's been building for years, like a slow leak in a ceiling pipe that finally burst one winter night, soaking everything I thought was stable. I've always been the good son. Not the favorite, definitely not that, but the reliable one. The steady one. The one who shows up when the car breaks down or when someone needs help filing taxes. My younger brother, Tyler, he was the one who got away with everything. Total golden child. If I came home late in high school, it was disrespectful. When he stumbled in at 3 a.m. smelling like a brewery, it was boys will be boys. I learned early on that my place in the family was more functional. Less loved, more useful. After college, I landed a solid IT job and started saving like crazy. I didn't party, didn't travel much, didn't even upgrade my car. I was determined to buy a house before I hit 30, and I did. Well, kind of. That's where the story really starts. When I was 28, my mom called me during lunch one day. Said she had an idea, and I already knew what that meant. She'd always call things ideas when what she really meant was, "I want something from you, but I'm going to make it sound like it's good for both of us." This time, the idea was that she, my stepdad Ray, and Tyler had found the perfect house, but they couldn't afford it alone. "It has enough space for everyone," she said, like we were the freaking Brady Bunch. "We could build real family roots here. You could finally have a home office. And think about it, no more rent." The house was gorgeous, I won't lie. 2 stories, big backyard, even a tiny sunroom that I instantly imagined filling with plants and books. The catch, of course, was that I'd be footing most of the bill. But they spun it as an investment for me. They said they'd cover the utilities and groceries while I handled the mortgage. Tyler would get back on his feet soon, Mom said, and start contributing too. Ray had some work issues, but he was figuring things out. The whole thing reeked of uncertainty, but I was tired of throwing money into a rental, and honestly, a part of me just wanted to believe my family could work as a team. So I said yes. I put my name on the mortgage, paid the down payment myself, moved in with them, and for a little while, it was okay. We had dinners together. Tyler was civil. My mom even seemed proud of me. That's probably what kept me going. I didn't realize I was buying into an illusion. The first cracks showed about 6 months in. Tyler still wasn't working. Said he was between opportunities, which is code for playing Call of Duty until 3 a.m. and blaming capitalism for everything. Ray started leaving early in the morning with vague references to a gig, but there was never a paycheck. Utilities went unpaid. Groceries got thinner. And whenever I brought it up, Mom would tilt her head and say things like, "Well, you're the one with the good job, Marcus. You can handle it, can't you? I tried not to blow up. I really did. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that they'd find work soon, that I just had to be patient. But I started feeling less like a homeowner and more like an ATM with a bedroom. It didn't help that they acted like the house was theirs. Tyler invited friends over constantly. Ray changed the locks without telling me. My mom rearranged my office while I was out of town for work and turned it into her reading nook. The day I found her going through my mail, just to check if there was anything important, I nearly lost it. Still, I bit my tongue. My therapist, yeah, I'd started seeing one, said I had to set boundaries. So I did. I printed out a budget, highlighted what I was paying and what they weren't. I asked them to start pitching in, nothing huge, just a couple hundred each month. They acted like I was asking for a kidney. We're your family, Mom said, like that was some kind of get-out-of-jail-free card. I know, I told her. That's why I've let it go on this long. Tyler rolled his eyes and muttered something about me being obsessed with money. Ray didn't even show up to the conversation. After that, things got weird. Cold. Passive-aggressive. Tyler stopped talking to me unless he needed Wi-Fi fixed. My mom would make dinner but forget to make enough for me. They started having these little family meetings when I wasn't home, and I'd come back to find changes in the house, furniture moved, chores reassigned, no shoes in the living room rule that somehow only applied to me. But the real blow came last November. I'd been swamped with work and looking forward to Christmas. My job had been hectic, and all I wanted was a quiet holiday. I'd even bought decorations, nothing crazy, just a tree, some lights, a wreath for the front door. I set everything up one Saturday morning while they were out. That night, they came back and acted like I'd set fire to the living room. Why didn't you ask us first? Mom said, her arms crossed, glaring at the tree like it had insulted her. I thought we were celebrating together, I said, confused. We decided not to do Christmas this year, Tyler chimed in. It's a waste of money. We all agreed, Mom added. No one told me, I said. Well, maybe if you were around more, she snapped, you'd know what's going on. I felt this numb kind of silence settle in my chest. I just stood there, looking at the lights blinking behind her. She had this tone like I was the outsider, like I'd barged into their space with my tree and my joy and ruined everything. But I swallowed it. I packed up the decorations, took down the wreath, told myself it wasn't worth fighting over. I even convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, next year would be different. And then came this past week. I got home from a business trip and found the living room decked out in lights. Stockings hung over the fireplace. Christmas music playing. They were decorating the tree together, laughing. I stood in the hallway watching them for a second, thinking maybe they were trying to surprise me. But then I heard my mom say, it's so nice not having Marcus around to ruin the vibe. I didn't even know what to do. I walked in, and everything went quiet. Oh, Mom said, flatly. You're back early. Guess I missed the memo about not doing Christmas again, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She didn't even flinch. Just looked me straight in the eye and said, we're not celebrating Christmas with you this year. Just like that. I don't know what she thought I was going to do. Get angry? Cry? Beg to be included? I just nodded, walked to the kitchen, pulled out my laptop. And while they went back to decorating the tree I wasn't invited to, I logged into my mortgage account, clicked Remove Co-Borrower. And when it asked if I was sure, I didn't hesitate. Not for a second. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. Because the moment they realized what I'd done and what it meant, the masks came off. That was when everything exploded. It didn't take long. 3 days later, I was eating lunch in my office when my phone started blowing up. First, it was a text from Mom. Marcus, what did you do to the mortgage? Then another, this time in all caps. You're being dramatic. This isn't funny. I didn't reply. Not right away. I just stared at the messages, the words blurry for a second like my brain was buffering. I'd expected them to notice eventually, but I hadn't expected panic, and I definitely hadn't expected it this fast. I figured maybe I'd have a week, tops, before they realized the implications. I didn't even think they'd care that much. But apparently they did. My mom tried calling next. I let it ring. Then again. I ignored that one too. Finally, a voicemail came through. I don't know what I expected, some kind of apology maybe. Nope. Marcus, you're being vindictive. This house is a family home, not some financial weapon you can use to punish us. I raised you better than this. Call me back. That last line made me laugh out loud. I raised you better than this. As if the irony wasn't thick enough to spread on toast. By the time I got home that evening, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Normally, Tyler would be gaming and Ray would be pretending to fix something. But now, nothing. Just the faint hum of the fridge and the smell of burning something in the kitchen, probably one of Ray's infamous experimental stews. I walked in like I always did, set my keys down, kicked off my shoes. I didn't expect a full ambush in the living room, but there they were, Mom, Ray, and Tyler, all sitting stiffly on the couch like they'd rehearsed a courtroom intervention. "You need to fix this," Mom said without looking at me. "Hi, Marcus." "Welcome home," I said flatly, dropping my laptop bag by the stairs. "Don't play games," Tyler snapped. "You messed with the house stuff. That's illegal." I raised an eyebrow. "Illegal? You mean updating the title on a house I paid for?" "It's not just yours," Mom hissed. "We've all lived here. We've made it our home." "You've lived here for free," I said. "That's different." Ray finally spoke, voice low. "You're making a mistake, son." "I'm not your son," I said without thinking. The room went still. That one hit. Ray looked away, and my mom's face changed. Not sadness. Not hurt. Just cold. Like a mask she'd worn too long and forgot how to take off. "After everything we've done for you," she said quietly. That's when something in me snapped. "You mean like gaslighting me into paying your mortgage while you turned me into the family punching bag? Or is it the part where you threw Christmas like a party and uninvited me from my own house? Help me out here." "Don't be dramatic," she said again. Always that phrase, like it was a sedative she could inject into any uncomfortable truth. I walked past them to the kitchen, opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water. My hands were shaking slightly, but not with fear. It was a different kind of adrenaline-controlled, focused. I could feel something shift in me, like a line had been crossed that couldn't be redrawn. "You know," I said, leaning against the counter, "I used to think this was my fault. That if I just worked harder, paid more, kept quiet, I could earn a place in this family." "Marcus," Mom started, her tone suddenly softer. "Too soft. Practiced. But I get it now," I cut in. "You don't want a family. You want a landlord who doesn't ask questions. And that's not me anymore." I took a sip of water and looked at each of them. Tyler was red in the face, bouncing his knee like a kid in detention. Ray was unreadable, the kind of quiet that comes from years of checked-out indifference. And Mom, she looked like she wanted to say something clever, something cutting, but the words weren't coming. So I helped her out. "I've spoken to a lawyer," I said. "Technically, you're all still tenants. But there's no lease, which means you've got 30 days to figure something out." Pure silence. "You're evicting your own mother," she said, voice trembling now. "After all I've done for you? You stopped being a mother the moment you treated me like a wallet." The room stayed frozen for a moment, like even the furniture was waiting to see what would happen next. And then Tyler stood up fast, knocking over the coffee table with his knee. "This is insane, man. You're not serious." "I'm completely serious. You can't do this," he shouted, and I could see the cracks forming. His cool, slacker energy melting away into pure panic. "I can," I said calmly. "And I will." I turned and started up the stairs, ready to lock myself in my room and let the rest of the night pass in silence. But as I reached the top, I heard my mom's voice one last time. "You think you're so righteous," she called up. "But you'll regret this, Marcus. Families don't forget." I stopped, just for a moment. Then I turned back toward the hallway, not far enough to see her, just far enough for her to hear me. "Good. I hope you remember every second." I closed the door behind me and sat down at my desk, breathing slowly. The quiet wasn't peaceful, it was tense, like the air before a storm. Because this wasn't over. And they were about to push back harder than ever. The next morning was the kind of quiet that felt wrong. Not peaceful, more like the air in a room after a huge fight, where every sound feels louder than it should. I could hear someone moving around downstairs, clinking dishes just a little too hard. Passive aggression served up with toast. I didn't go down. I wasn't in the mood for round two, and I knew they weren't either. Not yet. But the silence was only the calm before they regrouped, and sure enough, by that evening, the real campaign had begun. It started with Mom sliding a letter under my door. Yes, a literal letter. In cursive. It was 3 pages long, written on stationery she usually saved for birthday cards. The opening line? "I'm writing this as a mother who loves her son, not someone trying to control him." Yeah, okay. The letter was a masterclass in emotional manipulation. Paragraph after paragraph about how much she'd sacrificed for me, how she'd worked 2 jobs after my dad left, how she never complained, she did actually, how I used to cry when I scraped my knee, and how she was always there to pick me up. Then came the guilt, how heartbreaking it was to see our family fall apart, how my actions were tearing everyone down, how I had let money turn me cold. It ended with, "I just want my son back. Please don't do this." I sat there reading it, my chest tight, not because I believed her, but because part of me still wanted to. That was the problem with my mom. She didn't raise me with love. She raised me with obligation. And those roots are hard to rip out. I didn't reply. The next day, it escalated. Ray caught me coming out of my room and stood there in the hallway like some makeshift bouncer. "You know," he said, arms crossed, "this isn't just your house. We've put in a lot of work here." I blinked at him. "You replaced a light bulb last month." He didn't like that. His face tightened. "This isn't the way families handle things." "No," I said, brushing past him. "But it's how landlords handle unpaid tenants." That afternoon, the thermostat was mysteriously locked. My mom suddenly decided the upstairs bathroom was off limits. The laundry schedule got switched without notice. Petty stuff. Childish stuff. But it kept building. I found Tyler using my computer in my office one night, just sitting in my chair, looking through my browser tabs like it was totally normal. "What are you doing?" I asked, trying not to raise my voice. He looked up like I'd interrupted something sacred. "Relax. Just checking something. You always act like you own everything." "I do own this," I said sharply. "Yeah," he said, standing up slowly, his voice turning low. "Well, maybe it's time you stop acting like the king of the castle. You're not better than us, Marcus." I just stared at him. And he added, "One day you're going to be the one asking for help. And I hope you remember this moment when we say no." It was almost funny. Help? From them? I wanted to laugh, but all I did was close the door behind him and lock it. That night, I started sleeping with a chair under the handle. I wish I could say that was paranoia. But the next morning, I woke up to find my bedroom door frame scratched near the lock, like someone had tried jamming it. That's when I stopped playing nice. I started documenting everything. Photos. Texts. I set up a camera in the hallway pointed at my door. I printed out state tenancy laws. Highlighted every clause that gave me the right to issue a notice. And I started planning an exit, not just for them, but for me. Because even when they were gone, I knew this place would feel like a graveyard of tension, a haunted house of unresolved resentment. 2 days later, the final straw came. I got home from work, walked into the kitchen, and stopped cold. They'd gone into my fridge, my shelf, where I kept my stuff separate, and dumped out every container. Tupperware, yogurt, leftovers from the Thai place I liked. All of it in the trash. The shelf was wiped clean. A note was taped to the door. One word. Community. No signature. Just that. I didn't yell. I didn't storm through the house or demand answers. I went upstairs, opened my laptop, and sent the formal notice to vacate. Printed a copy. Slid it under the living room door, where they were watching some reality show. 5 minutes later, I heard Tyler yell, "What is this?" I didn't answer. Not that night. But I knew they'd come knocking. And when they did, they brought backup. Because the next phase of their plan? That's when the extended family got involved. The night after I handed them the official notice, I knew I wasn't going to get peace. They weren't going down quietly, not this crew. I just didn't realize how far they'd go to turn the narrative. It started with Aunt Deborah. She called me the next morning, voice dripping with forced sympathy, like she'd already chosen a side but was trying to make it sound neutral. "Marcus, sweetie, I heard there's been some tension at home. Your mother's very upset. She said you're kicking them out?" I took a deep breath. "They've been living in my house rent-free for almost 4 years, Deborah. They've contributed nothing. I'm just asking them to take responsibility for once in their lives." She paused. "I just don't think it's very Christian, honey. Especially this time of year." There it was. The guilt. The classic family tactic. Make you feel like the villain while they rewrite the script in real time. Over the next week, I got texts from 3 cousins I hadn't heard from since 2019. 2 of them were just checking in. One sent me a passive-aggressive Bible verse. Even my grandmother, who hadn't been lucid for 2 Thanksgivings in a row, somehow recorded a voicemail that said, "Marcus, don't do this to your poor mother." I should have been furious. But instead, I felt clear. Like something had finally snapped into focus. This was the system. The web. The emotional pyramid scheme where my mom was always at the top, spinning her version of reality and getting everyone to buy in. And I was done subscribing. So I stopped replying. To everyone. I went to work. Came home. Documented everything. Waited. The 30-day clock ticked down, and with each week, the temperature in the house dropped. Figuratively and literally, Mom had taken to forgetting to turn on the heat. Tyler slammed doors. Ray sulked. The air was thick with unspoken things, but I kept to myself. Slept with my door locked. Cooked my own food. And waited. 3 days before the move-out deadline, I posted a calm, fact-based thread on Facebook. No rage. No drama. Just the truth. Hey everyone. Just wanted to clarify something that's been floating around the family grapevine. For years ago, I agreed to share a home with my mom, stepdad, and brother. I paid the full down payment and have covered 95% of all expenses since. Despite multiple attempts to create a shared system of responsibility, I've received nothing but manipulation and passive aggression in return. After being excluded from family events in my own home and seeing my boundaries repeatedly violated, I issued a lawful notice to vacate. This was not done out of spite, but out of self-respect. I wish them the best, but I'm done sacrificing my peace to preserve someone else's fantasy of family. And then I logged off. That thread didn't just stop the family guilt campaign, it nuked it. A few people tried to keep it going, but most backed off when they saw the receipts. Screenshots, emails, pictures of damage. I didn't name call or air every dirty detail I didn't need to. The facts spoke loud enough. When move-out day finally came, I didn't gloat. I didn't even speak. I had a friend with a truck help me carry their stuff, what little of it was actually worth keeping, to the driveway. I'd packed it all myself, carefully labeled, no drama. Tyler came out and shouted something about family betrayal, but I didn't answer. Ray kept his head down. Mom just stared at me with a look I couldn't quite place, not anger, not sadness. More like disbelief. Like she still thought I'd cave at the last minute. I didn't. They drove off mid-afternoon. No hugs. No final words. Just the sound of tires crunching the gravel as they disappeared down the street. When the car turned the corner, I closed the door behind me, locked it, and stood there in the silence. It was the quietest the house had ever felt. No stomping from upstairs. No late-night video games vibrating through the walls. No gaslighting. No guilt. Just me. And for the first time in years, I realized what that meant. Peace. Over the next few weeks, I cleaned. Repainted walls. Got new locks. Reclaimed my office. Turned the second guest room into a music space like I'd always wanted. I even put the Christmas decorations back up, just because I could. I had friends over for the first time in forever. Hosted a game night. Watched dumb movies on the projector in the backyard. Laughed more in 1 month than I had in the last 3 years. And I slept better than I had in a decade. I still get the occasional text from someone, hoping we can all make amends, but I don't bite. I'm not angry. I'm not bitter. I'm just done. Because sometimes, walking away is the revenge. Living well, setting boundaries, and choosing peace over performance, that's how you win. So yeah, we're not celebrating Christmas with you this year, she said. Cool, I replied. And now? I celebrate it exactly how I want. With joy. With music. With people who show up and mean it. And without a single passive-aggressive stalking in sight. Thanksgiving is supposed to be about gratitude, right? But in my family, it's more like a scheduled performance. Everyone arrives in their best sweaters and fake smiles, dishes in hand, pretending we all haven't spent the past 11 months pretending each other doesn't exist. I used to think it was just normal. Families argue, siblings fight, parents play favorites. But as I've gotten older, I've realized there's a fine line between dysfunction and outright cruelty. And my family, we don't just cross that line. We cartwheel over it. My name's Owen. I'm 32 now, and if you'd asked me 5 years ago where I saw myself today, I would have said, anywhere but here. I left home at 18, worked my way through college, lived in a string of cities chasing stability and, honestly, distance. Distance from the guilt-tripping phone calls, the backhanded compliments, the constant reminder that I wasn't one of them. Because even though I'm the oldest, I was always the outsider. The quiet one. The sentimental one. The one who didn't take after dad's get-it-done attitude or mom's flair for appearances. My younger brother, Grant, 3 years my junior, had always been the golden boy. He inherited dad's loud confidence, mom's gift of manipulation, and neither of their tendency to second-guess themselves. That combination made him magnetic to them. And I was the shadow in the corner of every photo. It wasn't always like this. There were moments, flashes of real affection growing up. Dad would take us to the cabin in the woods every summer, just the three of us. That old log place with the creaky screen door and the moss-covered dock became my sanctuary. I still remember sitting on the end of the dock with Dad, our fishing poles forgotten in the water, just watching the sun go down. He'd tell stories about how he built the place with his own hands before Mom came along. "This cabin will be yours someday," he said once, when I was 12. "Keep it safe, okay?" I nodded so hard my neck hurt. I believed him. But after Dad passed, things shifted. Subtly at first. Mom started redecorating the house, removing every photo of Dad that didn't have her in it. She stopped visiting the cabin. Then came the legal stuff. The will. The trust. The slow erosion of Dad's memory until all that was left was a box in the attic labeled Robert's junk. And me? I started noticing how often my voice didn't count in decisions. When Mom sold Dad's old truck, she told me after the fact. When she gave away his vinyl collection, she laughed that you wouldn't care about those old records anyway. When I asked about the cabin, she changed the subject. That brings me to this Thanksgiving. I hadn't planned on going. In fact, I'd RSVP'd with a polite thanks, but traveling's tough this year. But something changed last minute. I got a call from my cousin Lydia, a rare neutral party in our family circus, and she told me, almost as a warning, "You should be here. They're planning something. I don't know what exactly, but it has to do with the cabin." My stomach dropped. That place was the only thing left of Dad I felt connected to. I still visited once or twice a year, keeping the place clean, checking the pipes, doing repairs. Quietly, without asking permission, because I'd never needed to. I thought we all knew whose it was supposed to be. So I showed up, drove the 6 hours back to my hometown, stood on Mom's doorstep with a pumpkin pie from a bakery and knots in my stomach. She opened the door and looked surprised. No hug, just a once-over and a chirpy, "Well, look who decided to grace us with his presence." That tone, always so light, so performative, like her words didn't carry barbs. Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and turkey and unresolved tension. Grant was already there, of course. He strode over with that smug grin he's mastered since high school and clapped me on the back. "Didn't think you'd show, man," he said. "Thought you were too busy playing lumberjack in the woods." He laughed at his own joke. Mom smiled politely. I forced one back. The room felt colder than it should have, even with the oven on. Dinner was set for 7. The usual crowd trickled in. 2 aunts, a few cousins, Lydia, and her boyfriend. I helped carry in folding chairs, set the table, tried to stay out of Mom's way as she barked directions. "Not there, Owen. The good plates go on the big table. Please don't move the candles. Honestly, just sit down. You'll only make it worse." Each sentence delivered with a sugary smile that would fool anyone not used to her. Then, around dessert, it happened. The moment where the simmering tension cracked open just enough for the ugly truth to peek through. We were passing around slices of pie, apple, pecan, something gluten-free for Aunt Sheila, when Mom, completely unprompted, said, "Well, it's official. We finally sold your father's old cabin." There was a pause. The kind that makes your skin prickle because you know everyone's watching your reaction. I didn't say anything right away. I was trying to process the words. "Sold?" Without telling me, Grant leaned back in his chair, fork in hand, and smirked. "Yeah, took long enough. Honestly, surprised anyone wanted that dump." Another chuckle. A few awkward laughs from the table. Mom just sipped her wine. I cleared my throat. "You sold the cabin?" Mom nodded, setting down her glass. "It was just sitting there, Owen. Falling apart. Honestly, it was more of a liability than anything. And you're always so busy, we didn't think you'd be interested." "You didn't think I'd be?" I stopped myself. Looked down at my plate. "Did Dad's will say who it was supposed to go to?" She waved a hand. "Oh, that old thing. It wasn't clear. Something about family use, shared property. But really, that's impossible to enforce. Grant and I talked it over with the lawyer and decided it was best to sell it while it still had value." Grant snorted. "Like you could even afford it anyway." Something twisted in my chest, like a rubber band pulled too tight. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. I just stared at them, at their faces, so casual about it all, as if they hadn't just erased the one piece of my father that still felt untouched. My memories. The summers. The promise. And that's when it hit me. They didn't know. They didn't know who they sold it to. I smiled. Small at first. Just enough to make Lydia tilt her head, confused. I picked up my fork, cut a piece of pie, and calmly said, "Congrats on selling it to me." The room went still. Forks dropped. Grant's face froze mid-smirk. Mom blinked, her wine glass halfway to her lips. And that's when things really started to unravel. There was a silence you could slice through like warm pie. I've been in awkward family moments before, plenty of them. But this wasn't awkward. This was electric. Heavy. Like the air itself knew something had shifted and was waiting to see who'd explode first. I didn't say anything else. Just sat back, took another bite of pie like I'd casually announced I'd bought a new car. But in reality, my pulse was pounding in my ears. I could feel Grant's stare boring into the side of my face. Mom's mouth hung slightly open, like she was stuck buffering. Lydia blinked twice and subtly nudged her boyfriend, who whispered, "Wait, what?" It was Mom who spoke first, of course. "Don't be ridiculous," she said, a hollow laugh creeping into her voice. "You didn't buy the cabin. That's not funny, Owen." I looked up, met her eyes. "No joke. Right?" Grant cut in. "And I just bought the Eiffel Tower. Good one." He chuckled, but his voice had a sharp edge now. Less teasing, more uncertain. He hated not being in on the joke, especially if the joke was on him. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out a folded document, and slid it across the table like I was laying down a royal flush. It was a copy, just a few highlighted sections, and the closing signature. I'd brought it on a hunch. Not to cause drama, but because some part of me knew this dinner was going to end in some kind of war. And if it did, I wanted to be prepared. Mom didn't reach for it. Grant snatched it first, eyes scanning the top. His jaw clenched. "You're kidding me." Mom leaned over to look. Her expression shifted from disbelief to something much harder to read. Some cocktail of confusion, betrayal, and irritation. "You how?" Lydia's boyfriend let out a soft whistle. "You bought it before they even knew?" I nodded. "Few weeks ago. I saw the listing go up. Called the agent directly. She was shocked how fast I made an offer. Closed in under a week." "But how did you know?" Mom started. "I check the local listings sometimes," I said, keeping my voice even. "Especially around the lake. I get alerts. When I saw the address, I didn't hesitate." "Why didn't you say anything?" she asked, and now the performance kicked in. Offended mother, wounded and confused. "You could have at least told me you were interested. We would have discussed it as a family." I held back a bitter laugh. "Like how you discussed selling it." She had no response to that. Instead, she sighed dramatically, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "It's just a house, Owen." "No," I said quietly, "it's not." Grant shoved the paper back toward me. "You really think this makes you look good? You sneak behind everyone's backs and buy up the property like some vulture? That's real classy, man." "You mean like how you two sold it without telling me?" I countered. "We didn't think you wanted it." Mom snapped. I tilted my head. "Then why not ask?" The silence returned, colder this time. A few cousins shifted in their seats. Aunt Sheila muttered something about not wanting to get involved. Someone dropped a spoon. Mom stood up, smoothed her blouse, and walked toward the kitchen under the pretense of getting more whipped cream, though the bowl was still full. She always retreated when control slipped from her hands. Grant, on the other hand, leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, trying to reassert dominance. "Fine. You bought it. Congrats. But don't act like you've won something. You'll regret it when you realize how much maintenance that place needs. Leaky roof. Rotting porch. Pipes freeze every winter. It's a money pit. That's why we sold it." I shrugged. "I know. I've been the one maintaining it for years." His face twitched. "What?" "Yeah. I've been driving up every spring and fall. Cleaning it out. Winterizing it. Doing repairs. On my dime. Not that anyone noticed." "You had no right to do that." Mom's voice rang from the kitchen, sharp and cold. "It wasn't yours." "Maybe not legally," I said, louder now so she could hear. "But emotionally? Spiritually? Dad gave it to me long before he passed. You both just ignored that because it didn't fit your plans." "Don't get dramatic," she said, walking back into the dining room. "Your father never put that in writing. If he wanted you to have it, he should have made it official. I think he thought you'd honor his wishes without needing a contract," I replied. Her eyes narrowed. "Then he didn't know me very well." There it was. A hush fell over the room. Even the sound of silverware scraping against plates stopped. I felt that line slap me harder than anything she'd ever said. Not because it was surprising, but because it confirmed what I'd always feared, that to her, honoring Dad's memory was never the plan. It was an obstacle. Grant stood up now, too, as if taking a cue. "This whole thing is ridiculous. You think just because you have some childhood memory of the place, you're entitled to it? Grow up, Owen." The real world doesn't work that way. I stared at him. You mean the real world where people lie to family and sell property behind their backs? Oh, get over yourself, he scoffed. You always act like some wounded little orphan. Newsflash, you're not special. Dad's gone. Move on. Something cracked in me. Not anger. Not grief. Just exhaustion. I pushed my chair back slowly and stood. You're right, Grant. I'm not special. But I'm not stupid either. And I'm done pretending this family treats me like anything more than an inconvenience. That stirred murmurs. Mom frowned. No one's ever said that. You didn't have to, I said. It's in every decision I'm excluded from. Every phone call not returned. Every time you pretended I didn't exist unless you needed something. You want to talk about real world? In the real world, people communicate. They show basic respect. You've both failed at that for years. Grant opened his mouth to argue, but Lydia beat him to it. He's not wrong, she said quietly. All heads turned. She rarely spoke up, but now she sat up straighter. You guys treat him like he's just this side character in your perfect little family play. It's been like that since we were kids. Lydia, Mom said sharply. No, I'm serious, she said. You always made him feel like the outsider. Even when Uncle Rob was alive, you'd ignore what he wanted just to push your own agenda. It's not right. She doesn't know what she's talking about, Grant muttered. I know enough, Lydia replied. Mom looked like she wanted to scream, but she reined it in. She had an image to maintain. Always did. Well, she said with forced calm, this has clearly gotten out of hand. Maybe we all need to take a breath then. I already took mine, I interrupted. Back when you sold Dad's cabin out from under me. Everything that happens next? That's just the consequences. She didn't reply. Neither did Grant. I left the room. Didn't storm out. Just walked calmly down the hallway toward the foyer. Behind me, the murmurs picked up again. Lydia followed. She didn't say anything, just gave me a look that said, finally. I stood in the hallway for a moment, staring at the framed photos on the wall. Not one had Dad in it anymore. Just Mom, Grant, the cousins. My absence was so consistent it felt deliberate, and I realized then it probably was. I was never supposed to come back. But I had, and I wasn't just back. I'd come with receipts. And next time we talked about the cabin, they'd realize this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. I didn't leave the house that night. Not physically, anyway. My coat was half on, keys in hand, when Lydia gently touched my arm and said, Don't give them the satisfaction of thinking you ran. So I stayed. Back at the dining table, the cleanup had started, but no one was talking much. The clinks of forks and spoons stacking on ceramic plates felt unnaturally loud. Grant had disappeared somewhere upstairs, probably to call his wife and complain about me, and Mom was doing her usual silent fury routine, wiping down spotless counters like they'd personally offended her. I sat back down at the far end of the table, far from where Mom had returned to tidying. Lydia slid into the seat next to me, offering me a half smile and an extra piece of pecan pie. Still warm, she said. Shame to waste it. I appreciated the gesture, but my appetite was gone. My mind kept replaying the scene. Grant's smug disbelief, Mom's icy tone, her final, damning words. Then he didn't know me very well. That line stuck like a sliver under my skin. Dad had trusted her. Trusted that she'd honor what he said, even if it wasn't etched in legal stone. I hadn't fought her at the time because I believed she was grieving, because I thought, naively, that his memory would mean more than money or power. But it was never about grief. It was about control. And now, I was beginning to suspect it always had been. You okay? Lydia asked after a minute. No, I said. But I will be. That was all I allowed myself to say, because deep down I was afraid that if I said more, I'd unravel. And I didn't want to cry in my childhood dining room with a plastic pumpkin centerpiece smirking at me. The evening limped along. Cousins said their goodbyes awkwardly. Hugs were exchanged half-heartedly. And soon the house was mostly quiet again. I assumed Grant had left without saying goodbye, which was fine. He was always better at slamming doors than saying words that mattered. But just as I was pulling out the futon in the guest room, yes, they hadn't even made space for me in a real bed, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Hope the cabin's worth it. You'll see what you really bought soon enough. No signature. But I didn't need one. It was Grant. I stared at it for a full minute, heart sinking slowly. I thought about replying, asking what that meant. But I didn't want to give him the satisfaction. So I put the phone down, sat on the edge of the futon, and stared at the worn-out bookshelf across the room. That's when I noticed something strange. A familiar binder, poking out from the shelf where Mom kept old tax returns and board games missing pieces. It was blue, labeled Cabin Maintenance 2004 to 2015 in my dad's handwriting. I hadn't seen it in years. He used to write everything down, repairs, expenses, even fishing conditions on the lake. I pulled it out, opened it. Pages and pages of meticulous notes. Roof patching dates. Well inspections. Replaced screen door hinge. Owen helped. July 2010. I flipped through it, running my fingers over the scrawled ink. I was almost smiling when something odd caught my eye. In the very back pocket was a folded sheet of legal-sized paper. I opened it, and my breath caught. It was a handwritten letter, dated 6 months before Dad passed. Addressed to me. I started reading, my hands trembling. Owen, if you're reading this, I guess your mom's finally gone through these old files. I hope it's because she's looking to pass the cabin on to you, not because she's trying to bury what I've written here. I know I never put it in the will. I should have. I let your mother talk me out of it, said it'd complicate things, that it should all go to the family equally. But I always intended the cabin to be yours. You were the only one who ever cared about that place like I did. You showed up. You cleaned. You listened. You saw it for what it was, not just some old shack. That place is yours in every way that matters. If they try to sell it out from under you, I hope you fight for it. Not just because I want you to have it, but because I want you to know, I saw you, Owen. You were always the one I counted on. I just wish I'd said that more clearly before I ran out of time. Love, Dad. I sat there for what must have been 15 minutes, staring at the paper as tears blurred the words. My father's voice echoed in my head, each sentence hitting me like a wave. He knew. He knew Mom would try something, that Grant would follow her lead. And he'd tried, in his own quiet way, to leave something behind that would anchor me when it happened. But he hadn't hidden it well enough. Because if I just found this letter tonight, that meant Mom either never opened the binder, or she did, and buried it on purpose. That thought flipped a switch in my brain. I stormed downstairs, gripping the letter, my feet light with adrenaline. Mom was in the kitchen again, wrapping up leftovers with robotic precision. She barely looked up when I entered. Could you not slam the stairs? She said coolly. I held out the letter. Her eyes flicked to it, then to my face. And I saw it, the briefest flicker of recognition. You knew, I said, my voice low and shaking. You knew he wanted me to have it. She turned back to the counter. That letter isn't legally binding. That was all she said. No apology. No explanation. Just a cold dismissal. My hand clenched around the paper. He trusted you to do the right thing. Well, then he was naive, she said without turning around. Your father was a good man, but he wasn't a smart one when it came to family. He thought sentiment was stronger than practicality. He was wrong. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You hid this from me. I filed it, she said. It wasn't my job to hold your hand through inheritance fantasies. I stepped forward. You sold it out from under me, behind my back, after lying for years, and then mocked me at Thanksgiving like it was some kind of punchline. She finally turned, face hard as granite. Because you were always the child who needed to be taught how the world works. I thought if you didn't get the cabin, maybe you'd finally move on. Stop clinging to the past like it owed you something. My heart was pounding now. So you tried to erase me. She didn't deny it. You made it easy, she said. I stood there, shaking, letter still in hand, and realized that the betrayal wasn't sudden. It wasn't one decision. It was years of erosion, small exclusions, quiet rewrites of our family's history, and now, a final, calculated erasure of the only thing that connected me to the version of my father I still carried with me. The next day, I left early. No goodbyes. Just slipped out before sunrise with my bag, and that letter clutched in my coat pocket. But I didn't drive straight home. I went to the cabin. When I pulled up, frost clung to the windows and the grass crunched underfoot. The lake was still, glassy, the dock dusted with early snow. I unlocked the front door, my front door, and stepped inside. Everything smelled like pine and dust and memories. I lit a fire, sat on the same old couch where Dad and I used to eat cereal and play cards. And I realized something. They hadn't just tried to take the cabin. They tried to take him away from me, piece by piece, memory by memory. And if Grant's text was any hint, they weren't done yet. But neither was I, because now, I had more than just the deed. I had the truth, and I was about to use it. The fire crackled low in the cabin fireplace, and I sat motionless, staring into it like it had answers I hadn't figured out yet. The letter lay open on the coffee table beside me, Dad's handwriting lit orange by the flames. The air was still, too still, and the silence was the kind that presses on your ears. Outside, a breeze stirred the frosty branches of the tall pines surrounding the lake, the only sound for miles. It should have felt peaceful, but it didn't, because now I knew what I was up against. And for the first time in a long time, I felt small, powerless, like a grown man walking back into a childhood nightmare and realizing the monster was real all along and had learned to smile. I stayed in the cabin that day and the one after that. I didn't answer calls, not even Lydia's. I couldn't. I was afraid if I heard her voice, the dam would break. And I didn't want to break. Not here. Not in his space. The cabin was cold and the plumbing temperamental, but it was mine. And I took small comfort in that. I chopped wood, fixed a loose hinge on the back door, resealed a drafty window. Quiet, mindless tasks to keep my hands busy while my head spun. At night, I stared at the ceiling, heart pounding, replaying every conversation from Thanksgiving like it was on loop. The mockery, the dismissal, the bitterness in Mom's voice when she said Dad didn't know her. She was right. He didn't. And neither did I. On the third morning, I woke to find the mailbox open and a legal-sized envelope stuffed inside. No postmark. No stamp. Someone had driven up in the night and left it there. Inside was a letter from a local attorney, Franklin and Hughes, formally requesting my immediate attention regarding the property at Lake Heron, known as 221 Pine Shore Road. That was the cabin. The letter claimed there was reason to believe the transaction resulting in your acquisition of said property was based on misrepresented intentions and prior familial agreements. It asked, advised, that I return ownership to the rightful family trust to avoid a civil dispute. I read it twice, then a third time, and then I laughed. A short, bitter, breathless sound. Because there it was, the next move. Grant had lawyered up. It didn't matter that the sale was legal. It didn't matter that they had listed the property themselves, and I had purchased it fair and square through public channels. They couldn't stomach that I had outmaneuvered them. So now they were playing dirty. The real kicker? The letter was dated before Thanksgiving. They'd known. The whole show, Mom's faux surprise, Grant's mocking disbelief, had been a performance. A manipulation designed to corner me, guilt-trip me, make me second-guess my decision after they failed to stop it legally. I dropped the letter on the table and just sat there, stunned. For hours. By nightfall, I realized I hadn't eaten all day. My stomach growled, but the thought of food made me nauseous. I poured a glass of water, took one sip, then poured it back out. I was unraveling, and I knew it. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the old twin bed with the knotty pine headboard Dad carved, listening to the wind whip around the cabin and wondering how I'd really gotten here. Because if I was being honest, this wasn't just about a cabin. Not anymore. It was about being erased, scrubbed out of my own history by the people who were supposed to protect it, who were supposed to protect me. When Dad died, I didn't fight. I let them decide what was best. I tried to keep the peace, to avoid being difficult. I told myself it wasn't worth burning bridges. But now, I was standing in the ashes of a bridge they burned behind my back. And it hurt. It hurt more than I'd expected it to. The next morning, I shaved. Not because I needed to, there was no one around to notice, but because I wanted to feel like myself again. I put on a clean flannel shirt, opened the cabin windows to let in the cold air, and sat at the kitchen table with a yellow notepad. And for the first time in days, I started to plan. It wasn't a grand, movie-style revenge fantasy. No, I'll ruin them monologue. Just a list. A very quiet, very steady list. 1. Find a real estate lawyer. Not someone like the guy who helped close the deal. Someone experienced in family property disputes. Someone who could help me draw a hard line in the sand before they tried to drag me into court. 2. Make copies of everything. The letter from Dad. The maintenance binder. Emails with the real estate agent. Photos of the cabin. The work I'd done. The invoices I'd paid over the years. I would document everything. Not for them, but for me. So when the gaslighting started, I'd have proof. 3. Talk to Lydia. She was the only one who saw through them. The only one who had been quietly warning me for years. If anyone knew more about what was going on behind closed doors, it was her. 4. Don't lash out. That one was the hardest. I wanted to yell. To scream, to call Mom, and tell her she'd failed as a parent. To tell Grant that I finally saw him for what he was, a selfish, greedy manipulator who never wanted a brother, just an audience. But I knew that's what they expected. They wanted me to break, to snap, so they could point and say, see, he's unstable. He doesn't deserve it. So I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. I would be calm, strategic, quiet, like always, but not weak. That same day, I drove into town and found the public records office. Asked for copies of the property deed and transfer. Asked to verify the chain of title. Everything came back clean. My name was on every document. I was the legal owner. But I knew that wouldn't stop them. On my way back, I stopped at a small coffee shop I used to go to with Dad after fishing trips. It was run down now, nearly empty, but the same guy, Paul, still worked the counter. He recognized me immediately. Owen, right? Been a long time. I nodded. Yeah. He gave me a free coffee and asked how Dad was. I told him he'd passed a few years ago, and Paul's face fell. He was a good man. Always had time to talk. Yeah, I said quietly. He was. We sat for a bit, and out of nowhere, Paul asked, that cabin still standing? Yeah, I said. I just bought it. His eyebrows rose. Didn't know it was for sale. Not many people did, I muttered. He didn't pry, just nodded. Well, if you need a good handyman or some help fixing it up, I know a couple folks. Your dad did a lot for people around here. They'd be glad to repay it. I thanked him, left a generous tip, and stepped out into the cold with something I hadn't felt in days. Support. Small, quiet, but real. Not everyone had forgotten who my father was. Not everyone had forgotten who I was. That night, back at the cabin, I sat by the fire and finally called Lydia. She picked up on the second ring. Took you long enough, she said. I needed some time. Yeah, I figured. There was a pause. Then she added, they're panicking, by the way. What do you mean? Mom called me yesterday, asking if I thought you'd be willing to reconsider. Then today, Grant called and said he's concerned about your emotional state. It's all theater, Owen. They're trying to build a case before they file anything. I swallowed hard. You think they really will? Grant's ego won't let him stop. And Mom, she hates losing. I rubbed my forehead. Then I guess I need to be ready. You are, she said. You're just not used to believing it. That line stuck with me long after we hung up. She was right. I'd spent my whole life letting them define me. And now that I was finally stepping out of that shadow, I didn't recognize myself. But I was starting to. Every plank I repaired in the cabin. Every document I photocopied. Every hour I spent alone in the cold silence of the woods. These were bricks. Quiet ones. Foundation stones. I wasn't just preserving a place. I was building something. My spine. My story. And it was finally starting to stand up straight. The days got shorter and the nights longer. Snow fell heavier across Lake Heron, blanketing the trees, the dock, and the roof of the cabin in thick white silence. But I didn't mind the cold anymore. In fact, I welcomed it. Every time I woke up to frost on the windows, it reminded me I was still here. Still standing. Still fighting. And I was getting stronger. The first change came quietly. I hired a real estate attorney in town, Mara Lewis, a no-nonsense woman with steel gray hair and the kind of voice that could silence a courtroom. She wasn't cheap, but she knew how to handle disputes involving family inheritance and property manipulation. Her words, not mine. We met in her office 2 days after the letter from Franklin and Hughes. I handed her everything. My deed, the cabin purchase agreement, Dad's handwritten letter, photos, old texts, even receipts from the last few years of me maintaining the place. She flipped through the stack, expression unreadable. Then she looked up at me and said, they don't have a case. I exhaled so hard I almost laughed. Really? You bought it fair and square, they listed it publicly, and the ownership transfer was clean. Whatever emotional angle they're trying to play, it won't hold in court. Especially not with this letter from your father. It's not legally binding, but it supports the narrative that you had reason to believe the cabin should have been yours. I nodded slowly. So what do I do? She smiled faintly. You breathe. Then you send a response. Firm, polite, and very clear. You don't owe them anything, Owen. But we'll make sure they know you're not backing down. I walked out of her office that day taller than I'd walked in. And the funny part? Nothing had actually changed. But everything felt different. For the first time, I wasn't playing defense. I wasn't just reacting. I was choosing, moving, building. The rise wasn't a montage of flashy wins or viral success. It was subtle. Intentional. Every step a quiet middle finger to the people who thought I'd fold. I got the plumbing at the cabin fully winterized with the help of Paul's handyman friend, Tom, a guy with a limp, a beard like a snow shovel, and a soft spot for old places. Your dad taught me how to set tile, he said one day while replacing the cracked backsplash in the kitchen. Didn't charge me a dime. Said it was my turn to pass it on. I found myself tearing up at that, which Tom pretended not to notice. We worked together for 2 weeks, slowly restoring the cabin without changing its soul, replacing rotted porch boards, reinforcing the roofline, even sanded and restained the dock, just in case the ice melted early and I wanted to sit out there come spring. During breaks, I'd sit at the table and sketch ideas in the same yellow notepad I used for my plan. Some pages were legal notes and calendar deadlines, but others became something else. A vision. See, the more time I spent in the cabin, the more I started to think, why stop at protecting this place? What if I built something with it? The cabin wasn't just a memory. It was a story. My father's story. Mine. And I wanted to share it, but not with the people who tried to erase me. With the people who needed it. So I got to work. I bought a decent camera and a used laptop from a pawn shop in town. Cleaned out the attic and turned it into a tiny editing nook. Taught myself how to shoot and cut footage, how to adjust lighting and frame a shot. I started small, videos about cabin restoration, how to re-insulate old windows, how to reseal cedar planks, DIY lake cabin survival tips for winter. I posted them on YouTube under the name Heron Revival. The channel grew slowly at first, 20 subscribers, then 50. But people started commenting, thanking me, asking questions. One guy from Montana said he used my window sealing method to fix his grandfather's fishing shack. Another woman messaged me to say her dad used to take her to a cabin just like mine, and my video felt like going home. That message floored me. I realized I wasn't just fixing a building. I was building connection. And the best part? I didn't have to ask anyone's permission. I posted once a week, then twice. Upgraded my mic, started narrating little stories about Dad while I worked. He used to say the porch creaked because the cabin was sighing after a long day. This is where we kept our tackle box, and the secret bag of candy he always pretended not to eat. The more I opened up, the more people responded. Views grew. Comments doubled. One video hit 10K. Then another. Then I got an email from a local newsletter asking to interview me about the man preserving Heron Lake's forgotten cabins. I nearly deleted it, thinking it was spam. But I said yes. And suddenly, things snowballed. The article went live in early January, titled Son Restores Late Father's Cabin, and the internet falls in love. It painted a picture I hadn't dared to hope for. They quoted my video about Dad, shared screenshots, even linked the channel. My subscriber count jumped overnight. I got invited to speak at a small community event in town. I stood in a church basement with folding chairs and a coffee urn in the back, telling strangers about why preserving the cabin mattered to me. They listened. Some even clapped. One older man came up afterward and said, "We need more people like your dad. And like you." That night, I sat on the dock, even though it was freezing, and cried for the first time in weeks. Not because I was broken, because I was healing. Slowly. Steadily. I didn't tell Mom or Gran about any of it. I didn't need their approval anymore. The less I heard from them, the better. Until, of course, they couldn't help themselves. It came in the form of a voicemail from Mom. Crisp, polite, and so fake it made my skin crawl. "Owen, I heard about your little cabin blog, or whatever it is. That's cute. I hope you realize you're not the only one who loved that place. Your father was part of a family, not just your father. Anyway, call me back. We should talk before this all gets too out of hand." Too out of hand. They'd already sold the place out from under me. Threatened legal action. Tried to gaslight me into thinking I didn't deserve the thing he told me was mine. I didn't call back. Instead, I took the voicemail, the lawyer letter, the Thanksgiving video Lydia had secretly recorded on her phone. Yep, she got most of the conversation and uploaded them into a secure digital folder my attorney could access. Mara emailed me 2 words, "well documented." And life went on. I got a P.O. box in town for business inquiries. Sold branded merch, simple stuff, Heron Revival mugs and beanies. I didn't make much, but it helped cover repairs. I started a Patreon, just to see, and within a month, had over 100 supporters who chipped in so I could restore the fireplace next. I found myself smiling more, sleeping better, And somewhere in the back of my mind, I realized something had shifted. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. Not of their judgment, not of their schemes, not of their silence. Because for the first time, I wasn't surviving their approval, I was thriving in their absence. And the icing on the cake? I'd just finished filming a video about rebuilding the cabin's old tool shed, complete with a funny story about Dad accidentally locking himself inside it one summer, when I got an email from a regional PBS producer. They were working on a series about rural preservation, and they wanted to feature me, my cabin, my story. I sat in stunned silence reading the email, the fire crackling softly behind me. My tea had gone cold. The wind was picking up outside, and snowflakes swirled across the dock. I read the email again. Then I laughed. A full, deep, honest laugh. Because the people who tried to erase me, they had no idea. They thought they'd sold a cabin. But what they really did was give me the stage I never asked for, and the voice I never thought I had. And now? Now I had the spotlight. And I was just getting started. The day the PBS producer visited the cabin, something shifted in me again, but this time, it wasn't personal. It was strategic. He arrived bundled in a thick wool coat and scarf, stepping carefully down the icy gravel driveway with a cameraman and a sound tech trailing behind him. His name was Charlie, early 40s, soft-spoken, clearly the kind of person who preferred being behind the scenes. But the moment he stepped inside the cabin, he looked around with this quiet awe, like he could feel the stories still clinging to the wood. "I don't think we'll need to fake anything," he said, almost to himself. "This place already speaks." The segment they filmed was short. Only 8 minutes for the regional special, but they spent all afternoon here, capturing every corner of the cabin, recording my voice as I talked about Dad's love for the land, the repairs I'd done, and the decision to preserve something old in a world obsessed with new. I left out the drama. They didn't need to know that this place had been nearly stolen from me, or that I was still fielding threats wrapped in fake concern from my mother every other week. But I could tell Charlie sensed something beneath the surface. After the shoot, as he sipped black coffee in the kitchen and packed up his notes, he said, "You've got something here, Owen. Something real. You ever thought about writing a book?" I laughed, because the idea sounded ridiculous. I wasn't an author. I was just surviving. But he tilted his head thoughtfully and added, "People care about more than cabins. They care about why we hold on to things." And that stuck with me. That night, after they left, I sat by the fire and thought about what I'd built, not just in the cabin, but online. The YouTube channel had passed 35,000 subscribers. The Patreon had reached $1,200 a month. Not millions, not fame, but stability. And more than that, leverage. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just the overlooked son. I was becoming someone other people listened to. And that terrified my family. I knew it because the messages started coming more frequently. Short, manipulative texts from Mom. Stuff like, "Your father would be ashamed of how you're weaponizing his memory, and it's not too late to bring the cabin back into the family name." Grant even emailed me once, attaching a grainy photo of the cabin's septic tank from 2015 with a snide, "Hope you budgeted for a full replacement, genius." But the more they tried to needle me, the more I realized they were losing their grip. And when people start losing control, they get sloppy. One afternoon, I drove into town to meet with Mara again. She'd found something interesting buried in the Franklin and Hughes communications, something they clearly hadn't expected us to read too closely. A single line in a memo from their office assistant, referencing prior financial entanglements between Ms. Emery and the estate of Robert Emery Sr. That stopped me cold. "Wait, estate? You mean the trust?" Mara nodded. I thought it was odd too, especially because your father's trust documents don't mention a separate private estate. But this line suggests there was another account, possibly something unaccounted for in the probate process. We dug deeper. 3 weeks later, we found it. Or rather, she found it. Mara's intern, Claire, combed through the old financial records Mom had filed when Dad passed, and buried in a footnote on an old tax document was a mention of a joint custodial account, opened in my name. From when I was 17, a savings account, one Dad had contributed to for years, slowly and steadily. And apparently, one that Mom had quietly transferred into her name 6 months after his death, using a power of attorney that should have expired the moment he died. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was enough to matter. $87,000. That money had been mine, and she stole it. I stared at the photocopied transfer slip like it was written in a foreign language. Mara sat quietly, letting me absorb the shock. Claire watched me carefully, probably unsure if I was about to cry or explode. I did neither. I just nodded, very slowly. She's going to regret that, I said. Mara tapped her pen on the desk. We can go after it, if you want. Legally, you have a case. A strong one. I thought about it. The courtroom. The fight. The fallout. Then I shook my head. Not yet. Because right then, I realized something else. This wasn't just about a cabin anymore. This was about a pattern. She had always controlled the narrative. Moved the pieces. Redirected money. Decided who got what and when, and made you thank her for it afterward. But I wasn't a pawn anymore. I was a player now, and I was holding cards she didn't know existed. Back at the cabin, I began piecing it all together. I created a second digital archive, password protected, encrypted, stored on 3 separate cloud platforms under aliases. I backed up every message, every letter, every receipt. I even uploaded the old voicemail where Mom said, "He didn't know me very well." That line, more than anything, had become the cornerstone of my file. Because she was right. And now, I was going to use that truth to dismantle her game. The second thing I did was go public, quietly. I made a new video titled "The Cabin My Father Left Me," and how I almost lost it. I didn't name names. I didn't blame anyone. But I told the story. The real story. About how grief can be twisted. About family betrayal and silent battles. About fighting for something no one else sees the value in, because you know it matters. The video blew up. Within a week, it hit 250,000 views. Comments poured in. People shared their own stories of family manipulation, of siblings stealing inheritances, of mothers rewriting history. It struck a nerve, and the messages started to change. I began getting emails from local preservationists, authors, even a small production company that wanted to option my story for a documentary short. One woman from Vermont said she had gone through the same thing. Her mother had sold their family farm without telling her, and she fought to get it back for 3 years. "You're not alone," she wrote. "And you're not crazy." That line hit harder than any threat Grant ever sent me. Because that was the battle, wasn't it? To make you feel crazy for remembering what actually happened. To make you question whether you ever had a right to care. But I wasn't questioning anymore. I knew exactly what had happened. And now I had the platform to make sure everyone else did too. Meanwhile, Lydia came through in ways I didn't even expect. She dug through old boxes of hers and found a dusty camcorder, one that Dad used to record home videos. The tapes were labeled things like Heron Cabin 2001 and 4th of July fishing. I borrowed a converter and began digitizing them, one by one. There he was, Dad, laughing on the dock, calling me Captain Owen as I struggled to reel in a fish half my size. Sitting on the porch in a folding chair, telling me about the constellations. Even one clip where he looked straight into the camera and said, "One day this'll all be yours, bud." I wept watching it. But I also got an idea. I edited the footage together into a 12-minute video titled "Before It Was Mine." It was raw, unpolished, real, and it told the story better than I ever could with words. That video changed everything. It hit 1 million views in under 2 weeks. News outlets picked it up. Podcasts emailed me. Even a few family drama YouTubers started reacting to the story, speculating about what my mom and brother had done, even though I never named them. I didn't have to. The story told itself. And the more attention it got, the more power shifted. Because now, I wasn't just some guy who bought a cabin. I was a voice, a symbol. And for people like my mother, that was the worst-case scenario. Not only had they failed to erase me, they had accidentally elevated me. All because they thought I was weak enough to roll over. And as I sat on the dock one snowy morning, watching mist rise off the frozen lake, I knew exactly what I was going to do next. It wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be cruel. But it would be final. Because I had something now that they never did. A story that people believed. And the truth? The truth was the most dangerous weapon of all. It started with an envelope. Nothing fancy. No flaming sword. No legal bombshell delivered in a dramatic courtroom scene. Just a simple, cream-colored envelope, sent via certified mail to an address I knew by heart. My childhood home. The one where Mom still lived, and where Grant still parked his shiny leased SUV out front like a trophy he hadn't quite earned. Inside the envelope was a formal letter, professional, clean, and very deliberately worded. It came from Mara's office. It explained that recent evidence had surfaced proving a misappropriation of funds from a custodial account set aside by Robert Emery Sr. for his son, Owen Emery. The letter stated that a formal inquiry had been opened into the unauthorized transfer of those funds into an account held solely by Evelyn Emery, and that unless restitution was made within 30 days, civil litigation would proceed. Attached were copies of the financial records, the original account forms, the transfer documentation, and the notarized timeline provided by the bank. There was also a handwritten postscript from Mara, small and elegant. Sometimes the best way to burn a bridge is to let them light the match. It was both a warning and a gift. And it was only the beginning. I didn't expect a response. But she called. Of course she called. It came through as private number 2 days after the envelope was delivered. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened with headphones, sitting on the edge of my bed, the fire casting flickers of light across the wood-paneled walls of the cabin. Owen, I got your letter. Or rather, your lawyer's letter. Very dramatic. But you're not thinking clearly. This isn't going to end the way you want. You're burning everything down, and for what? A pile of timber and a few YouTube views. Pause. Call me back. Let's talk before you make another mistake. I didn't call her back. Instead, I uploaded another video. This one was titled, What They Took. I didn't name names. Still haven't. But I told the story, finally, with every detail I'd held back before. The account Dad set up for me. The way it quietly disappeared after he died. The financial records we uncovered. I explained how sometimes the biggest betrayals don't come from strangers or enemies, but from people who claim to love you while quietly rewriting your story behind your back. I spoke calmly. No bitterness in my voice. Just truth. I let the facts speak for themselves. The internet did the rest. Within 48 hours, the video was trending. The comments section flooded with people who had been through the same. One woman wrote, "My sister forged our dad's will. I spent 6 years fighting it. Thank you for telling this." Another man said, "This made me realize I'm not crazy for cutting my mother out of my life. We don't owe loyalty to people who betrayed us." The video passed 3 million views by the end of the week. I never responded to my family. I didn't have to. They were already spiraling. Lydia, ever the quiet observer, sent me screenshots from the family group chat I hadn't been part of in years. She had remained in the group mostly to keep tabs, and now it was gold. "Grant, he's making us look like thieves to the entire country. Mom, no one will believe that money was his. It was for the family. He just found the paperwork first. Grant, his followers are sending me hate mail. They found my LinkedIn. Mom, he's playing the victim. He always loved being the victim. Grant, he's playing chess. And we're losing." That last line made me laugh. Because it was true. They were finally seeing the board and realizing they didn't know the rules. I made my next move quietly. No fanfare. No YouTube announcement. Just a letter, once again from Mara's office, sent to the Franklin and Hughes attorneys, officially requesting a cease and desist regarding the false claim of prior familial agreements over the cabin. The letter included video documentation of my father clearly stating his intent to leave the cabin to me, footage that had gone viral. It also pointed out that continuing to pursue this case under false pretenses would be viewed as harassment. The firm dropped the inquiry within 72 hours. Mara called me, trying not to sound smug. "Turns out the opposing counsel saw your YouTube video, the one with the doc and the VHS footage. Apparently their own junior associate said, and I quote, 'We are absolutely going to lose this.'" I smiled. "Let them watch," I said. "Everyone else is." I thought that would be the end of it. But there was one more twist. And this one came in the form of an email. Subject line, "Speaking request, New York Times event." At first, I thought it was spam. But it wasn't. The actual New York Times was hosting a regional storytelling event about legacy, inheritance, and the future of family-owned spaces. They wanted to feature 4 storytellers who had reclaimed family property against the odds. And they wanted me. I stared at the email, rereading it 3 times. It included a travel stipend, accommodations, and a small speaking fee. But that wasn't what made my heart race. It was the list of other speakers. One of them was a woman who had reclaimed her grandmother's bookstore after her uncle tried to bulldoze it into a parking lot. Another was a man who had fought his cousins in court for a barn that his great-grandfather had built by hand during the Depression. And now, I was going to stand beside them. I accepted immediately. Lydia helped me pick out a blazer that didn't make me look like I was trying too hard. We flew out together, her first time on a plane in years, and when I stood in front of that small, elegant crowd in the city, under warm stage lights and quiet murmurs of anticipation, I took a breath. And I told them the story. About a cabin, a father, a family that mistook quiet for weakness, and how reclaiming a place became reclaiming a life. The applause didn't thunder. It didn't need to. It was steady, genuine, the kind that doesn't wash over you like noise, but wraps around you like a promise. Backstage, one of the event organizers approached me and said, "You ever think about turning this into a book?" There it was again. That word, book. And maybe this time, I wouldn't laugh it off. I returned to the cabin a week later, the snow now melting off the roof in thick sheets. Spring was arriving. Slowly, but unmistakably. That same day, a package arrived in my P.O. box. No return address. Inside was a single item, a photograph. One I hadn't seen before. It showed me and Dad on the dock, maybe 10 or 11 years ago. He had one arm around me, and I was holding up a small fish, beaming. On the back, in faded blue pen, were the words. This is what mattered. Not the money, not the title, just this. No signature, but I knew the handwriting. It was Mom's. I didn't respond, because revenge doesn't always come with a gavel or a wrecking ball. Sometimes it's the silence. Sometimes it's the calm. Sometimes it's the quiet knowledge that you won. Not just the property, not just the argument, but the story. You kept it alive. And now? Now it belongs to you. The fallout came quietly. No fireworks, no breaking news headline, no screaming confrontation on a front porch. Just slow collapse, like a rotting house finally caving in after years of termites. After the PBS feature aired and the viral videos continued to circulate, the narrative shifted publicly and permanently. I didn't need to name names. People connected the dots. The subtler consequences started trickling in, not because I called for them, but because sometimes, when you shine enough light on a lie, the truth doesn't need to shout. Grant lost a consulting client. Then another. He'd built a nice little career as a self-styled legacy advisor, helping wealthy families transition assets across generations. It was all branding, smoke, and mirrors, but it paid well, until one of his top clients messaged him a link to my YouTube video, what they took with the line, "This isn't about you, is it?" Even though I never said his name, the description fit too closely. Too many mutual connections knew too much. People talk. They always do. A month later, his contract with the real estate firm he partnered with wasn't renewed. By then, word had spread to the professional circles that mattered to him. Trust lawyers, financial advisors, old college friends who had once idolized him. His LinkedIn stayed up, but he quietly removed the job titles. When Lydia asked about him, all I said was, "He's learning what it feels like to be invisible." As for my mother, her downfall wasn't loud either. It was slower, more personal, and I suspect that hurt her more. You see, Mom had spent her life cultivating this image, a graceful matriarch, pillar of the community, host of elegant charity dinners and tasteful brunches. She knew everyone worth knowing, and everyone knew her, or thought they did. But when the videos started spreading, especially the one with Dad on the old camcorder saying, "One day this'll all be yours, bud," something broke in her perfect reflection. She tried to push back subtly. An email to me, which I ignored. A public Facebook post that read, "Sometimes people rewrite history to serve their own ego. Some of us choose to stay silent out of dignity." It got 2 likes and a comment from her bridge partner that said, "Hope you're okay." But silence, in this case, wasn't interpreted as dignity. It looked like guilt. And people began to remember little things. How she talked about cleaning up Robert's estate. How she never once mentioned her oldest son in social gatherings. How the family cabin had mysteriously been sold, then ended up in Owen's name after a bidding war that didn't exist. The final nail came at her own garden club's spring fundraiser. Someone asked her why she wasn't involved in Owen's preservation project, especially since the Heron Revival channel had just announced it would be hosting a community weekend for fans and locals to visit the newly restored cabin. Mom smiled and said, "Oh, I don't really keep up with Owen's little videos. It's more of a hobby, really." To which someone else, probably without even realizing, replied, "Well, the New York Times didn't call it a hobby." That was when she realized she'd lost the room. She stopped attending public events not long after. Meanwhile, The community weekend at the cabin went better than I ever could have imagined. We had over 60 visitors, followers, neighbors, fans of the channel, who drove from as far as Michigan and North Carolina just to walk the floors I'd restored and stand on the dock where my dad taught me how to fish. We served cider and grilled sandwiches on the fire pit. Lydia handled logistics like a pro, and even Tom, the handyman with the snow shovel beard, came by to give mini carpentry demos. A little girl asked if she could plant a flower on the edge of the woods so the cabin has something alive always watching it. I nearly cried right there. Toward the end of the day, an older couple approached me. The husband had silver hair and walked with a cane. The wife wore a red flannel jacket and held his arm as they climbed the front steps. "You're Owen?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," I said. She smiled. "We were friends of your father. Rob was one of the best men we knew. Always talked about this cabin. Always said it'd be yours one day. I wish I'd known him better," the man added. "But I feel like I did now." That's when I realized this place had become more than just mine. It was Dad's again, and this time, everyone could see it. A month after the event, the civil suit settled. Mom's legal team, still trying to save face, offered to amicably resolve the issues surrounding the misappropriated custodial funds in exchange for confidentiality and non-disparagement. Mara was ready to drag them through court, but I told her to take the deal, not because I wanted to protect them, but because I didn't need a courtroom victory to prove anything anymore. The world already knew what they had done, and I'd already won in the only court that really mattered to me, my father's legacy. They transferred the full amount, $87,000, plus a small interest adjustment. Mara smiled when the wire came through. "You could put that toward expanding the property. Buy the neighboring lot." I shook my head. "No, I know what I'm going to do with it." 6 weeks later, I launched the Robert Emery Cabin Fund. Its mission was simple: help other people like me preserve family-owned property that's at risk of being lost, sold off, or forgotten. We started small, one cabin in northern Vermont, owned by an elderly woman whose kids wanted to bulldoze it for a condo project. We helped her set up a trust and restored the roof. Then another, an old farmhouse in Kentucky with a leaky foundation. I shared each project on the channel, and people showed up. Donations, volunteers, stories. I tapped into something bigger than myself, and it felt good. More than that, it felt right. I haven't seen Mom or Grant in over a year now. No texts, no calls. I heard through the grapevine that Grant moved out of state. Tried to start fresh in Arizona, maybe Florida, no one's really sure. One of our cousins said he's selling insurance now. I hope he's found some peace, but I doubt it. Grant never learned how to live without a spotlight. Mom still lives in the same house, alone. Lydia stops by every few weeks, mostly out of obligation, and says it's like visiting a museum. Everything preserved in perfect silence, but no warmth left. Just curated memories and air that's too still. She once asked Lydia if I'd ever come around. Lydia told her the truth. He doesn't live in your story anymore. As for me, the cabin is home now. Not just physically, but spiritually, emotionally. The old guest room is now an office. The attic holds a filming setup. The basement finally has working insulation. And the dock? It's got 2 new chairs, one for me and one for the past. Sometimes I sit there and talk to Dad. Not because I think he can hear me, but because I want to remember who I am, who he helped me become. Last week, I was walking through the woods behind the cabin when I found something strange, half buried under leaves and time. It was a rusted metal sign. Bent. Faded. I brushed the dirt away and read the old, flaking letters. Private, family only. I smiled. Then I carried it back to the cabin. I cleaned it, sanded it, repainted it carefully, one letter at a time. And now, it hangs over the front porch, just above the old wooden swing where Dad used to sip coffee in the mornings. Only now it reads, "Family is who shows up." And me? I showed up. So, I don't even know how to begin telling this story, but I've got to get it off my chest. It started out like any other family helping family situation, but it didn't stay that way for long. And what happened next? Well, that's the part that got me shaking my head and thinking, what the heck did I just do? Let's rewind a bit. For the past 6 months, I've been financially supporting a few of my family members, mostly my parents and my older sister, Jess. The economy hit them hard, and while I'm not rolling in cash, I'm doing all right in my job. I'm in my late 20s, and I've always been close to my family, so it seemed like the right thing to do. I paid their bills, covered their rent a couple of months, even helped with groceries. You know, the usual when you're the responsible one. At first, they were thankful. They'd send me texts. We couldn't have done it without you. And you're such a blessing. But here's where it started to get weird. Slowly, those texts turned into expectations. They'd call, "Hey, can you help with the car insurance this month? We're a little tight." Then, "Can you pitch in for the heating bill? You know how it gets cold here." And then it was, "We're a little behind on the rent. Could you help us out?" And each time, I said yes, thinking I was just doing what any decent family member would do. But then, one day, I got a text from my cousin. It was just a simple, "Hey, check this out." I opened the video, and to my horror, it was a clip of my entire family talking behind my back. They were sitting around in my sister's living room, having some kind of family meeting. And as they all chattered away, I heard my name pop up. Jess was the first one to speak, and she said, "Ugh, I can't believe we have to keep asking her for help. It's like she's the last resort." My stomach dropped, and then my mom chimed in. "She doesn't do enough, though. I mean, we help her out when we can, but she's always busy or too tired." And just like that, all the gratitude I thought I had been getting from them seemed like a facade. I was the last resort. They were annoyed with me for only helping when they needed it. It made me feel like a sucker. I sat there staring at my phone, just shocked. They didn't know I could hear them. They didn't know I was about to hear everything. Jess, my own sister, was the one complaining the most. This was the same sister who would call me crying when she couldn't pay her bills or needed an emergency babysitter for her kids. This was the same family who'd made me feel like I was their only shot at staying afloat. But now? Now I was the last resort. I didn't say anything. I didn't confront anyone. I sat in silence. But I knew one thing for sure. I was done. The next rent was coming due in a few days, and they were going to need help, like always. Only this time, things were going to be a little different. I spent the next couple of days in complete silence. No calls, no texts, no responses to any of their messages. Then, the day before rent was due, I sent them a single message. "You guys are on your own this time." No explanation. "No, I'm sorry. No, I can't help." Just that I could feel the tension building. I didn't hear anything for hours. But then, the phone call started. The first call came from my mom. I let it ring out, and then my phone buzzed with a text from her. "What do you mean? You've always helped us. What's going on?" I didn't reply. I just let the silence hang. After about an hour, I got a call from Jess. I almost picked it up, but then I remembered how she'd talked about me behind my back, and I couldn't bring myself to. The calls kept coming. Mom, Jess, even my aunt. Everyone started reaching out, trying to figure out what was happening. I wasn't even angry yet. I was more exhausted. But I knew I had to stand my ground. The next day, rent was due. I watched as they scrambled. I knew they were trying to figure out how to cover it, probably already calling every family member they could. I almost felt bad, but then I remembered the video. The way they'd spoken about me. Around noon, I got a message from Jess. "Please, I don't know what's going on, but we really need your help this time. We're not asking for much, just enough to get through. Please." It stung. She still didn't get it. She still didn't understand that I had been there for them, that I had helped. But this was different. This wasn't just about the money. It was about respect. I was about to leave it at that. But then my phone buzzed again. It was a video from my cousin. I hesitated before opening it, already knowing it wouldn't be good. The video started, and it was a clip of my family, Mom, Jess, and a couple of other relatives, sitting in the living room. And they were talking about me. Again, this time, the conversation was even worse. Jess was yelling, "Why does she always act like she's doing us a favor? We're her family. We've supported her whole life. And now that we're struggling, she's just abandoning us. It's not fair." Mom added, "I swear, she's got this attitude like we're not even worth her time anymore. And after everything we've done for her." I couldn't believe it. They still didn't see it. They still thought I was some kind of backup plan. A safety net they could rely on whenever things went wrong. I felt the anger bubbling up now. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about how little they truly valued me, how entitled they were, how they thought they could keep draining me without ever offering anything in return. I thought for a moment about how to respond. I could have called them, told them exactly what I thought, but that wouldn't do anything. It wouldn't change their behavior. I needed to make them understand the consequences of their actions. That's when the idea hit me. It was going to be risky. It was going to feel cold, but it would send the message I needed. I grabbed my phone and started typing. I didn't hesitate. Hey, I just watched the video. I'm done. I'm not going to be your backup anymore. From now on, you figure it out. Good luck. I hit send. The response was immediate. My phone started buzzing like crazy, but I didn't pick up. I didn't respond. I just sat there, feeling a strange mix of relief and tension that I had no idea what was coming next. But I knew one thing for sure. This was the beginning of something big, something that would change the way they saw me forever. And as I stared at my phone, waiting for them to realize the magnitude of what I'd just done, I couldn't help but wonder, how far would they go to get what they thought they were entitled to? The next few hours were absolute chaos. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Every few minutes, a new notification would pop up, texts, missed calls, voicemails. But I didn't answer. I just sat there, watching the messages flood in, feeling a twisted sense of satisfaction. They were panicking. They were finally starting to realize they couldn't always depend on me. Then, around 4 p.m., I got a voicemail from my mom. Her voice was shaky, and I could hear her trying to hold back tears. I don't understand what's happening, sweetheart. Please, you're our daughter. We've always been there for you, haven't we? Why are you doing this now? What's going on? I could feel the weight of her words, but I didn't budge. I wasn't going to let them guilt trip me anymore. I wasn't going to be their doormat. A couple of hours later, Jess sent a long message, filled with all the things I didn't want to hear. You know what, fine. If you want to be as selfish, be asterisk, then do it. But don't come crying when you realize how much you've hurt us. We're your family. We've done everything for you. And this is how you repay us? I thought you were better than this. I read the message. The anger was still there, but now it was mixed with a sense of bitterness. She still didn't get it. She still thought that because we were family, I owed them everything. The next morning, I got a text from my aunt. She had somehow gotten involved, probably after hearing about the situation from Jess. The message was more direct. This is crazy. What happened to you? Why are you being so heartless? You're acting like you owe us nothing when you know damn well we've been there for you. This is not how family acts. I was done. I felt like I'd said everything I needed to say, but it didn't stop there. That afternoon, I was at work when I got a call from my boss. He told me there had been an urgent message from my mom and Jess, something about an emergency. They had even gone as far as calling my workplace to track me down. I could feel my blood starting to boil. This was getting out of hand. But the worst part? I wasn't sure how far they'd go to make me cave. That's when the final straw came. I got a text from my mom saying, "We need help or we're going to lose everything. If you don't help, you're not just letting us down, you're ruining our lives. Do you really want to be responsible for that?" I sat there, staring at my phone, my hands trembling. I wanted to help. I really did. But everything about this was so twisted now, so unfair. I thought about how my family had treated me, how they'd taken advantage of my kindness. And then I remembered the video my cousin had sent me, the one where they'd called me the last resort, the one where they'd complained about how little I'd done, even after all the money I'd given them. The guilt wasn't there anymore. I wasn't going to be their fallback anymore. But how was I supposed to make them understand? How was I supposed to make them feel the pain of what they'd done? And then it hit me. If they wanted to see what real consequences looked like, I would show them. Not with words, but with actions that I didn't know what was going to happen next. But one thing was certain, this wasn't over. It was just beginning. The days that followed were tense. My family tried to reach out every which way they could. Texts, calls, even emails. I wasn't responding. I wasn't going to break, not this time. And slowly, it seemed like they were starting to feel the weight of what they'd done. I could tell they were desperate. Jess started sending me videos of her kids, trying to tug at my heartstrings. The usual, "Look what you're doing to us" routine. But it didn't work anymore. The guilt had stopped working a long time ago, but what did get to me, surprisingly, was a message from my dad. He hadn't said much up until now. He wasn't the type to confront me directly, but when I read his message, it felt different. "I don't know what's going on, but I raised you to be better than this. You've always been there for your family. Don't let pride get in the way of what's important." The words stung. They hit harder than I expected, because deep down, I knew I'd always been the one to fix everything. I was the one who kept it all together, even when they didn't appreciate it. But still, I didn't respond. Then, one evening, I got a call from my cousin again. I almost didn't pick up, but I was curious. He'd always been the level-headed one in the family, so I knew he might be the one who'd see things from my side. "What the hell is going on?" he asked bluntly as soon as I answered. "Everyone's losing it over here. Your mom's a mess. Jess is threatening to kick you out of the family group chat. Are you seriously doing this to us?" His words hit me differently. This was family, my family, freaking out because I had finally said no. And for what? For refusing to continue letting them walk all over me. "You guys really think you're entitled to my help," I said, my voice steady but cold. "I'm not going to keep rescuing you when you've never learned to stand on your own." He sighed on the other end. "I get it, but don't you think you're overreacting? We're just asking for a little help, just this one last time. You can't just abandon us." "You think I'm abandoning you?" I snapped. "You've been using me for months, taking everything I give without so much as a thank you. And now you want me to help again? What would you have done if I hadn't been there? How long do you think I can keep doing this?" There was a long pause. "Look," he said, "I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We're all messed up right now. But maybe, just maybe, you're punishing the wrong people. You're punishing your family." I didn't respond right away. His words lingered in the air like a cloud of doubt. But I couldn't let myself second-guess this decision. I'd already made it. I was done being the fallback plan. The next morning, I found out that things had gotten even worse. Mom had apparently called a family meeting. Jess had told everyone I was being selfish, and now they were trying to get me to feel bad for them, saying things like, "She's turning her back on us." But then, just as I was about to shut it all out and ignore the chaos, something happened that made everything escalate. I got a call from my landlord. "We're going to need that rent payment by the end of the day, or we'll have to start eviction proceedings." They said that. I felt my stomach drop. I knew the situation was getting dire for them, but this was bad. And I knew, without a doubt, that they would come to me at the last minute, expecting me to bail them out again. But this time, I wasn't going to that. I decided to do something drastic. Something that would make them realize that their actions had consequences. That I hung up the phone and sent my mom one last text. "I'm not your safety net anymore. You're on your own. I've done enough." The waiting began. That I didn't know how they'd react. I didn't know if this was the end of it all or the beginning of something much worse. But the one thing I knew for sure was that I had finally taken back control. And as I sat there, staring at my phone, waiting for the fallout, I couldn't help but wonder, how far would they go to make me change my mind? Would they turn on me completely, or would this be the wake-up call they needed? The answer came sooner than I expected. The phone rang again. But this time, I wasn't sure if I was ready for what was coming. I stared at the phone screen, watching as it buzzed with my mom's name flashing across the display. I hesitated. I knew this was it. The moment they either came to their senses or went full-on nuclear. I took a deep breath and answered, bracing myself for whatever was coming. "What?" Her voice was barely audible, shaky, like she couldn't believe what had just happened. "Why are you doing this? I thought you loved us." I could hear the cracks in her voice. The desperation, the guilt tripping. I almost felt bad, but I had to remind myself that this was exactly what they did to me every time I helped. They made me feel like I owed them everything. But I didn't. Not anymore. "I do love you, Mom," I said quietly. But love doesn't mean constantly enabling people to make the same mistakes over and over again. You've never learned how to stand on your own, and I can't keep being your crutch. The line was silent for a few seconds. Then she whispered, "But your family. You're our family. You're supposed to help." "And I have." I snapped, the frustration rising again. "I've been helping you for months. Hell, for years. But I'm not doing it anymore. You've had enough of my help. It's time you learn how to fix things yourself." She went quiet again, but I could hear her trying to keep it together. "You're punishing us, your family, like we're strangers to you. How could you just turn your back like this?" I felt the weight of her words, but I stood firm. "I'm not punishing you. I'm setting boundaries. I've done enough. And now, you need to face the consequences of what you've been doing. I'm not going to fix it for you this time." The call ended with her barely saying goodbye. I didn't feel a sense of relief, though. It wasn't over yet. They weren't just going to let me walk away like that. They were going to fight back, and fight back they did. The very next day, I woke up to a flood of messages. From Jess. From Mom. Even my aunt again. It was as if they couldn't let it go. It was one guilt trip after another. Each message more desperate than the last. That Jess's text was the worst. "I can't believe you would do this to me. I know we've had our differences, but I never thought you'd turn on us. You've always been there for me, and now you're just letting us drown. I can't believe I have to do this on my own with my kids. Thanks for nothing." I felt that familiar sting. But then something strange happened. Instead of caving, instead of feeling guilty, I just didn't care. I had to remind myself again, this wasn't my fault. I wasn't the bad guy here. They were, but the real bombshell came a few hours later. My aunt sent me a message, along with a picture of my mom sitting on the couch, looking utterly defeated. This is on you, you know. She's heartbroken. We all are. You've broken this family apart with your selfishness. You're making her feel like she's lost her daughter, like she's a failure. Do you really want to be the one to do this to her? I stared at the message, my heart pounding in my chest. For a second, I wondered if maybe I had gone too far. But then I thought about everything they had said to me, about how they had used me, taken advantage of my kindness, and only seen me as a tool for their convenience. No, I wasn't the one breaking the family. They had already done that to themselves that I didn't reply. I just let the silence hang. But the storm wasn't over yet. That night, things escalated beyond just guilt trips. The family began to rally against me. Jess posted something on Facebook, calling me out publicly. When your own family abandons you during the hardest time of your life, you know you're done. Don't ever let anyone tell you that blood means anything. Some people will only be there when they need something from you. I'll never forget what you've done to us. The post quickly gained traction. My other relatives started chiming in with supportive comments, siding with Jess, piling on the accusations. It felt like a whole family-sized betrayal. They weren't just mad at me. They were publicly shaming me, making it look like I was the villain. But instead of feeling angry or sad, I felt a strange calmness. They were making this public now. They were forcing me into a corner where I had no choice but to stand my ground, to make sure they saw the consequences of their behavior. The next day, I decided to turn the tables. I shared the video my cousin had sent me, the one where they were talking about me, calling me the last resort, complaining that I didn't do enough. I posted it on my own Facebook, adding a caption, "This is what my family really thinks of me. This is how they talk about me behind my back. Maybe now, they'll see what I've been dealing with all this time." The fallout was immediate. Comments exploded. My family members were furious, accusing me of airing dirty laundry, of betraying them in the worst way possible. But this time, I didn't care. The truth was out, and now they were forced to face it. For a while, there was nothing but silence. No messages, no phone calls, no angry texts. It felt like they were trying to figure out what to do next, like they were waiting for me to cave. But I didn't. I stuck to my guns. Then, a week later, I got a call from my dad. The one person who hadn't really been part of the drama. The one person who had stayed quiet, but I could feel his presence looming over everything. "I think we need to talk," he said, his voice soft but serious. "Come over, let's have a face-to-face." I agreed, knowing this was the moment where everything would either fall apart or start to heal. When I walked into my parents' house, it felt like I was entering a war zone. Jess was there, and so was my mom. They both looked exhausted, like they'd been fighting each other more than they'd been fighting me. The tension in the room was thick, but I wasn't backing down now. "I've been thinking," my dad said, sitting down in the living room, "about everything that's happened. And I realize we've all messed up. But maybe, just maybe, we've been using you for far too long." I looked at him, surprised. It was the first time anyone in the family had admitted that I wasn't the one in the wrong. "I'm glad you see that," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Jess shifted uncomfortably in her chair. I don't know how to say this," she started, her voice quieter than usual. "But I shouldn't have put that post out. That was wrong. I let my anger get the best of me, and I shouldn't have dragged you into it like that." I nodded slowly. "I appreciate that, Jess. But that doesn't change what's happened. I needed to hear that from you. And from Mom, too." There was a long pause, and finally, my mom spoke up. "I never meant to make you feel like you owed us everything. I've been selfish, and I've taken you for granted. I'm sorry. I couldn't believe it." After everything, she was finally admitting it. But even with the apology, it didn't erase the pain. I was glad to hear it, but the trust had been broken. It would take time to rebuild, and I wasn't sure we'd ever fully get there. "I don't need you to say sorry," I replied, my voice steady. "I just need you to understand. I'm done being the person everyone runs to when things go wrong. If you want things to change, it has to start with you, all of you." There was a long silence after that. No one seemed to know what to say next. But I could tell something had shifted. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one holding everything together. They were. After a while, my dad stood up. I'm going to make sure we fix this, okay? No more using you as a backup plan. No more pretending like we can't do it on our own. We'll work through this together. It wasn't a perfect resolution, and I wasn't expecting everything to magically get better overnight. But it was a start. They'd finally seen the truth, and they were starting to face the consequences of their actions. I left my parents' house that day. I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Relief. I knew it wasn't over, but it was a step in the right direction. Maybe, just maybe, my family would learn to stand on their own 2 feet. Maybe they would finally understand what it meant to respect me, to stop using me as a safety net. And as I walked away, I couldn't help but feel like the hardest part was finally over. They had been forced to see the truth. And now, it was their turn to change, but I wasn't holding my breath. So what do you think? Did I do the right thing? Or should I have tried to work things out differently?